In the modern world, a body can sleep in a clean room, drink filtered water, eat food from distant places, and still fear diseases that seem to rise from comfort itself. But for most of human existence, people lived close to smoke, soil, animals, hunger, cold, and wounds. Yet many of the diseases we fear today were far less common, or almost impossible, in their world. Something about our safety changed the map of sickness inside us. Why did ancient humans rarely get the diseases we fear today? A strange thing happens when a person looks at the modern world from inside the body, rather than from outside it. The room may be clean, the water may be safe, the food may be wrapped, cooled, inspected, transported, and stored with a care that no ancient family could have imagined. A person may sleep under a roof, behind walls, away from wild animals, away from freezing wind, away from open wounds and hunger. Yet in that protected life, the names of the diseases we fear most are often not the old names of sudden infection or broken bone. They are quieter names: heart disease, diabetes, stroke, cancer, dementia, high blood pressure, chronic inflammation. These are not simple enemies standing outside the cave. They grow slowly, sometimes for years, inside a life that appears safe. This is why the question is not whether ancient humans were healthier than us in every way. They were not. Their world was dangerous, painful, and often short. Many infants did not survive. A deep cut could become fatal. A bad winter could thin a group. A difficult birth could take a mother's life. But the pattern of sickness around them was different, because the world pressing on their bodies was different. For most of human history, the body woke into scarcity, movement, temperature change, uneven meals, darkness after sunset, and direct contact with soil, smoke, plants, animals, and other people in small groups. That was not a paradise. It was the original setting in which the human body was shaped. Our organs, appetite, muscles, immune responses, sleep rhythms, and stress reactions did not begin in hospitals, offices, supermarkets, or bedrooms lit by screens. They began much earlier, in bodies that had to walk, search, carry, digest, heal, shiver, sweat, remember, and sleep under conditions that changed with weather and season. When we ask why ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today, the first answer is not that they possessed a mysterious strength we lost completely. The first answer is quieter. Many modern diseases need a modern stage on which to develop. They need long years of abundant calories, soft food, low movement, long sitting, artificial light, chronic stress, dense populations, longer lifespans, and bodies that no longer meet the same physical demands their older systems were built around. A disease is not only a thing inside the body, it is also a relationship between the body and its environment. Change the environment, and the same body can begin to fail in a different way. Imagine an early human group moving through a cold morning, not as heroes, but simply as people with no choice. Their food was not available by opening a door. Their warmth was not guaranteed by a switch. Their muscles were not exercised for health, but used because survival required use. Their blood sugar rose and fell with real hunger and real effort. Their fat stores mattered during lean times. Their sleep followed darkness more closely than choice. Their immune systems met wounds, parasites, smoke, dirt, and microbes, but they did not spend decades inside the same pattern of excess and stillness that surrounds many people today. The ancient body was not protected from disease. It was exposed to different pressures. This difference matters because it prevents a false story. It would be wrong to say ancient humans were naturally pure, or that modern medicine made people weak, or that civilization only damaged the body. Modern life has saved countless lives from infections, childbirth dangers, starvation, injury, and childhood death. But safety changed the shape of risk. The dangers that once arrived from outside the body were partly pushed back. In their place, slower dangers had more time, more fuel, and more opportunity. A heart can live long enough to harden. A brain can live long enough to decline. Cells can divide for enough decades to make mistakes. A body that once stored energy to survive hunger can store too much when hunger rarely comes. So the story begins with a mismatch, not a judgment. The human body is ancient, but the world around it has become very new. And somewhere between those two facts, the diseases we fear today found their quiet opening. The longer a body lives inside one kind of world, the more that world begins to write itself into the body. This is easy to miss, because modern life often looks clean from the surface. A kitchen counter may be wiped smooth, a bed may be soft, a clinic may be nearby. A person may know the names of vitamins, calories, blood pressure, cholesterol, and sleep cycles. Yet the body beneath that knowledge is still older than all of it. It still carries systems shaped in a time when food was uncertain, movement was not optional, and the border between the body and the land was much thinner. For ancient humans, sickness did not arrive in the same pattern because life did not repeat in the same pattern. There was no stable supply of sweet drinks across every season. There were no long years of sitting in chairs. There were no sealed rooms where daylight could be replaced by artificial light late into the night. There were no decades of soft, energy-dense food always close to the hand. This does not mean the ancient body was clean or safe. It means the ancient body was being challenged by a different arrangement of forces. A person walking across open ground, gathering roots, tracking animals, carrying wood, sleeping near smoke and waking with the cold, did not live in a health program. They lived near the beginning of the human story, where every ordinary act required the body to spend energy, read the environment, and adjust. The body did not need to be told to move. The landscape demanded it. The body did not need a schedule for fasting. The uncertainty of food created it. The body did not need to seek sunlight as a wellness habit. The day itself was the main source of light. These details matter because many diseases feared today build slowly from repetition. A repeated meal pattern, a repeated sleep disruption, a repeated stress signal, a repeated absence of movement, a repeated abundance that the body treats as opportunity, even when it becomes overload. In deep human history, repetition existed too, but it was tied to seasons, weather, migrations, animal behavior, plant cycles, and group movement. The pattern was not endless comfort. It was change. A cold week could force more burning of energy. A lean month could reduce stored fat. A long walk could lower blood sugar. A dark night could quiet the body in ways a bright room cannot easily imitate. None of this made ancient humans immune to pain. Their teeth could wear down. Their joints could ache. Their bones could break. Their lungs could suffer from smoke. Their stomachs could carry parasites. Their skin could open to infection. But the slow diseases of modern abundance needed conditions that ancient life rarely supplied for long enough. The human body began as a survival instrument, not as a machine designed for permanent plenty. It learned to hold energy because hunger could return. It learned to react strongly to injury because a small wound could become dangerous. It learned to favor salt, fat, and sweetness, because these things were not always easy to find. It learned to conserve effort because waste could cost life. In a world of scarcity, these were not flaws. They were quiet forms of intelligence built into flesh. But when the same body enters a world where energy is cheap, movement is avoidable, stress can last for months, and food can be eaten without physical search, an older wisdom can become misplaced. The body is still trying to protect life, but it is reading signals from a world it did not evolve to understand. This is why the question of ancient disease must be handled carefully. The past was not a cure. The present is not simply a mistake. Modern medicine, sanitation, antibiotics, surgery, vaccines, safer childbirth, and emergency care have changed human survival in ways ancient people would have experienced as almost impossible. More children live. More mothers survive. More wounds heal. More infections can be treated. More people reach ages that were once much less common. But once human beings began surviving old dangers more often, other dangers had time to appear. Diseases that need decades could finally unfold across decades. Weaknesses that once remained hidden could become visible. The body that once fought hunger now faced excess. The immune system that once answered wounds and invaders now had to live with persistent low-level irritation from a new way of life. The brain that once watched the dark for immediate danger now carried imagined dangers into sleep. The first human bodies were not built for a world without fear, effort, hunger, cold, or darkness. They were built inside those pressures. So when those pressures changed, sickness did not disappear. It changed its path through us. There is another quiet reason ancient humans rarely carried the same diseases we fear today. Many of those diseases require time, and time itself was distributed differently in the ancient world. A modern person may live through childhood, adulthood, middle age, and old age under medical protection that keeps the body going far beyond many dangers that once ended life early. This is a great achievement. It is also one reason the map of illness changed. Some diseases do not arrive like a storm, they gather like dust. A blood vessel narrows slowly. A cell line makes small errors across many years. A brain carries tiny changes long before memory begins to fail. Blood pressure pushes against the walls of arteries for decades. Sugar and fat, taken in day after day, can leave traces that are invisible for a long time. The ancient world did not often give the body such a long, stable corridor for these processes to unfold. This does not mean that no ancient person grew old. Some did. Archaeology and anthropology both remind us that old age was possible, and older people could hold knowledge, care for children, remember landscapes, and guide younger members of a group. But the age structure of early human groups was not like the age structure of a modern society. More people died young. More lives were interrupted by infection, injury, childbirth, exposure, hunger, or violence. A disease that usually appears after many decades would have had fewer bodies in which to fully reveal itself. This is not a romantic truth. It is a cold one. Some diseases were rare, partly because the world was harsh enough to remove many people before those diseases had time to grow visible. The point is not that ancient life protected the body better. The point is that ancient life filtered danger differently. Near the beginning of the human story, the body met immediate tests more often than slow ones. A thorn wound, a fall, a bad tooth, contaminated food, a long dry season, a cold night without enough shelter, a childbirth complication, a deep cut from stone or bone, these could become central events in a life. Modern people fear many diseases because they can imagine a long future with them. Ancient people often faced threats that allowed less imagining. The danger was close, practical, and physical. The body either healed, adapted, endured, or failed. In that setting, sickness was shaped by contact with the ground, with water, with weather, with other bodies, and with the limits of food. The diseases of long-term surplus were not absent because the body was magically stronger. They were less favoured by the conditions around it. A person who must walk far to gather food is not choosing exercise. A person whose meals change with season is not practicing a diet. A person who sleeps after darkness is not following advice from a book. These patterns were built into life before they became choices. The first humans did not design them for health. They inherited them from the land. Their bodies were constantly being pulled back into movement, hunger, rest, and exposure. That rhythm could be cruel, but it also prevented some modern patterns from becoming continuous. There was less opportunity for a body to sit for years while energy entered easily. Less opportunity for light to stretch the evening deep into the night. Less opportunity for food to be refined into soft, dense forms that could be eaten quickly without much chewing, searching, or labour. Less opportunity for stress to be abstract, constant, and disconnected from immediate action. The modern world changed all of these things at once. It did not simply add comfort, it rearranged the timing of the body. Meals became more regular and often more abundant. Work became less physical for many people. Night became brighter. Survival became less dependent on daily movement. Fear became more mental and prolonged. Medicine allowed many people to live long enough for slow damage to matter. In this changed world, disease could become quieter, deeper, and more delayed. The ancient body had not vanished, but the world speaking to it had changed its language. That is why this question must begin slowly. Ancient humans were not free from suffering. They were not stronger in every way. They simply lived under pressures that made different illnesses rise, and kept many of today's feared diseases from finding the same long, steady path through the body. The human body was never shaped around the idea of constant fullness. For most of its long history, it lived with gaps. Gaps between meals, gaps between successful hunts, gaps between ripe plants, warm days, safe shelters, and easy rest. These gaps were not chosen. They were the ordinary texture of life near the beginning of our species. A body that could endure them had a better chance to survive. A body that could store energy when food appeared, slow down when food was scarce, and keep moving even when hungry carried a quiet advantage. This is one of the deepest reasons many diseases we fear today did not appear in the same way among ancient humans. Their bodies were often under pressure from shortage, while ours are often under pressure from surplus. The same biological tools can behave very differently under those two worlds. A craving for sweetness makes sense when sweet fruit is seasonal and difficult to find. A desire for fat makes sense when fat means dense energy in a landscape where many foods are lean, fibrous, or uncertain. A tendency to store extra energy makes sense when the next week may bring less. Even the body's ability to reduce energy use during scarcity makes sense when waste could become dangerous. These systems were not mistakes. They were survival mechanisms, but they were tuned in a world where abundance came and went, not in a world where abundance waits quietly on shelves, in refrigerators, in packages, and in drinks that require almost no effort to consume. Ancient humans did not need to count calories because calories were not endlessly close. They did not need to plan movement because movement was inside the search for food, water, firewood, shelter, and safety. Their muscles, bones, lungs, liver, pancreas, and heart were not living separately from the landscape. They were pulled into the landscape every day. A person walking over uneven ground, carrying a child, digging roots, scraping hides, climbing, squatting, lifting, gathering, and following animal tracks was not exercising in the modern sense. The body was simply doing what life required. That requirement changed the inner chemistry of survival. Blood sugar was used by working muscle. Stored fat could become useful during lean days. Appetite was balanced against effort. Rest came after expenditure, not before it. In this older rhythm, the body met food as something connected to time, season, labor, and uncertainty. The modern body often meets food as something disconnected from all four. It can eat without walking. It can consume sweetness without waiting for fruiting seasons. It can take in fat without the difficulty of hunting or processing. It can remain warm without burning many calories. It can move little while energy enters often. This does not make the modern person morally weak. It means the environment has changed faster than the body's ancient systems. The first humans were not designed for endless restraint in a world of endless access. They were designed to notice opportunity. When energy appeared, the body was inclined to take it seriously. When sweetness appeared, the brain treated it as valuable. When rest was possible, the body accepted it, because unnecessary effort could be costly. In a sparse world, these instincts helped life continue. In a dense world of food and comfort, the same instincts can quietly support weight gain, insulin resistance, fatty changes in the liver, high blood pressure, and inflammation. These diseases are not caused by one meal, one lazy day, or one personal failure. They often grow from a long conversation between ancient biology and a new environment. The body keeps answering modern signals with old solutions. Store this. Save energy. Seek dense food. Avoid needless effort. Prepare for scarcity. But scarcity may not arrive. The ancient alarm waits for a winter that never comes in the same way. This is why the question of disease becomes more interesting than a simple comparison between past and present. Ancient humans were not spared illness because their bodies were pure. They were spared certain modern patterns because their world interrupted those patterns. Hunger interrupted surplus. Movement interrupted storage. Cold interrupted comfort. Seasonal change interrupted sameness. Darkness interrupted wakefulness. Even discomfort, though never desirable, placed limits around the body's excess. Today, many limits have been removed, and that removal has saved lives in countless ways. Yet it has also allowed older survival mechanisms to run without the old boundaries. The body that once carried people through uncertainty now carries many people through too much certainty. Too much sitting, too much available food, too much light, and too little physical demand. Somewhere in that reversal, diseases of abundance begin to look less like sudden invaders and more like ancient adaptations living in the wrong season. The body's relationship with hunger is one of the oldest stories written into human biology. Long before fields, markets, kitchens, and schedules, food came unevenly. Some days brought meat, marrow, nuts, tubers, fruit, eggs, honey, fish, or shellfish. Other days brought less. The body could not assume that energy would arrive at the same hour tomorrow. Because of that, it learned to treat food as an event, not as background. When food appeared, the body paid attention, the mouth watered, the gut prepared, hormones shifted, the brain marked taste, smell, and memory. Energy was not merely pleasure, it was information about survival. This helps explain why ancient humans did not often develop the same long diseases of constant abundance that many people fear today. Their appetite was powerful, but the world around appetite had limits. A sweet taste might come from ripe fruit, but fruit was seasonal and often surrounded by fiber, water, seeds, distance, and effort. Fat might come from an animal, but an animal had to be found, killed, carried, shared, and processed. Starch might come from roots or tubers, but they had to be dug, cleaned, chewed, and sometimes cooked. Food entered the body with resistance around it. That resistance mattered. It slowed eating. It demanded movement. It connected energy to labor. Near the beginning of the human story, a meal was rarely separated from the work that made it possible. A modern person can take in a large amount of energy while barely moving, and can do it many times in one day. The ancient body had no such pattern as a normal condition. This difference changes the meaning of hunger. In ancient life, hunger was not always a medical problem or a failure of planning. It was part of the rhythm between the body and the land. The body used hunger as a signal to search, remember, cooperate, and move. It could sharpen attention. It could make the smell of food stronger. It could push a person to recall where certain plants grew after rain, where animals passed at dawn, where water gathered in dry months. Hunger was uncomfortable, but it belonged to a world in which discomfort had practical direction. In many modern lives, hunger and appetite are pulled away from that older setting. Appetite can be awakened by images, stress, boredom, habit, packaging, soft textures, and flavors designed to be easy to continue eating. The body still responds as if a rare opportunity has appeared. It does not know that another opportunity will be available again soon, and again after that. The pancreas, liver, fat cells, blood vessels, and brain are asked to manage a pattern that would have been unusual across most of human evolution. This is where diseases such as type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, obesity-related strain, and high blood pressure become easier to understand without blame. They are not simply signs that the body is broken. They can be seen as the result of old survival systems being overfed, with signals they were never shaped to receive so often. Insulin helps move energy into cells. Fat storage helps preserve energy for later. Hunger hormones help drive the search for food. Reward circuits help the brain remember valuable sources of calories. In a world of scarcity, these systems protected life. In a world of permanent access, they can become trapped in repetition. The body keeps storing for a future shortage, while the shortage keeps being postponed. Ancient humans did not need perfect discipline to avoid many diseases of overconsumption. Their environment carried much of that discipline for them. Distance, season, physical work, chewing, sharing, spoilage, and uncertainty all placed natural borders around intake. These borders were not gentle, and they could become deadly when food failed, but they meant that the body's energy systems were repeatedly reset by movement and scarcity. A long walk after a small meal was not a health choice. A day of low intake was not a planned fast. A heavy physical task was not exercise. These were ordinary pressures of survival. The modern world removed many of those pressures, and in doing so, it removed many of the old interruptions that once kept abundance from becoming continuous. So when we ask why ancient humans rarely got the diseases we fear today, one answer lies in this quiet reversal. Their bodies were built to survive not enough, while many modern bodies must survive too much. The same appetite that once helped a person endure the uncertain landscape can now guide a person through a landscape of endless food, where the ancient promise of energy never stops whispering. The body that survived ancient scarcity was not only a hungry body, it was also a moving body, a sensing body, a body that met the day through muscle, temperature, light, touch, and repeated small demands. This matters because many diseases feared today do not grow from food alone. They grow from food entering a body that no longer spends energy in the way its older systems expect. Near the beginning of the human story, movement was not separated from life. A person did not wake and then decide whether to be active. The ground, the weather, the search for water, the carrying of wood, the gathering of plants, the tracking of animals, the making of tools, the care of children, and the need for shelter all called the body into use. Muscles were not decorative. They were part of memory, navigation, heat, balance, and survival. A human leg was not only for distance. It helped regulate blood sugar after food. A hand was not only for grasping. It shaped tools, broke fibers, lifted stones, carried meat, and cleaned hides. The back, hips, lungs, and heart were not waiting for scheduled exercise. They were constantly entering and leaving effort. That daily effort changed how the inner body handled energy. Working muscle acts like a place where sugar can go. It helps empty the bloodstream after a meal. It draws on stored fuel. It keeps circulation responsive. It tells bones that they are still needed. It reminds the body that energy is meant to be used, not only stored. Ancient humans could still suffer weakness, injury, exhaustion, and pain, but their ordinary world did not allow the same long stillness that surrounds many modern people. A chair, a vehicle, a desk, a screen, and a soft bed are not enemies by themselves. They are comforts, and many of them are useful. But when they gather into a whole day, and then into many years, they create a setting almost unknown to the older human body. Energy comes in, but little is asked of it. Muscles wait. Blood moves through a quieter landscape. The heart works, but not often against hills, distance, carrying, cold, or sudden need. The bones carry weight, but not always through varied ground. The body is alive, but much of it is underused. In the ancient world, even rest had a different meaning. Rest followed work, danger, walking, gathering, carrying, or hunger. It was recovery. In many modern lives, rest can come before the body has spent much. This changes the conversation between the organs. The body stores fuel because storage once meant protection, but movement no longer arrives with the same force to use what was stored. The muscles become less demanding. The liver and pancreas must keep managing incoming energy. Blood pressure, circulation, body fat, and inflammation can drift slowly under the pressure of repetition. This is why ancient humans rarely developed some modern diseases in the same pattern. Their world kept interrupting the chain. A meal was interrupted by effort. A day of sitting was interrupted by necessity. Comfort was interrupted by cold, heat, walking, or work. Light was interrupted by darkness. Plenty was interrupted by uncertainty. These interruptions were not chosen for health, and they were not gentle, but they kept the body closer to the conditions in which its systems first made sense. Modern life often removes the interruption. It lets food, sitting, light, stress, and indoor comfort continue beyond the older rhythm. From the point of view of evolution, this is very new. For hundreds of thousands of years, human bodies learned to survive by spending energy to get energy. Then, in a very short historical moment, many people began to receive energy without much physical cost. The body did not have time to become a different body. It carried its old instructions forward. Seek food, save fuel, rest when possible, react to stress, heal quickly, prepare for shortage. These instructions once belonged to a changing landscape. Now they often operate inside a stable room. The result is not immediate disaster. It is something quieter, a small imbalance repeated for years, a little more stored energy, a little less muscle demand, a little more pressure in the blood vessels, a little more difficulty clearing sugar, a little more inflammation beneath the surface. The ancient body did not avoid all disease. It simply lived in a world that forced many of its systems to complete the cycle they were built for. Seek, move, eat, spend, rest, and begin again. To understand why heart disease, obesity, and diabetes appear so strongly in modern fear, it helps to slow down and look at what these conditions need in order to grow. They do not usually appear from one day of eating too much or one evening of sitting too long. They are patient diseases. They gather through repeated signals. Too much energy entering too often, too little energy leaving through muscle, blood sugar rising again and again, fat storage, becoming a permanent condition instead of a temporary reserve, blood vessels carrying pressure for years, organs that once managed short bursts of abundance now being asked to manage abundance as a normal state. Ancient humans did not live outside biology. They could gain fat when food was plentiful. They could suffer hunger when food disappeared. They could become weak, injured, infected, or exhausted. But the long, stable pattern that feeds many modern metabolic diseases was far less common in their world. The ground beneath ancient life kept changing the equation. Food was not merely eaten. It was found, dug, gathered, tracked, cracked, cooked, carried, shared, and sometimes lost. A meal had a landscape behind it. That landscape placed friction between desire and intake. Near the beginning of the human story, sweetness might come from fruit or honey, but neither arrived endlessly. Honey could be dangerous to collect. Fruit came with seasons, fiber, water, and distance. Meat could be rich, but hunting could fail. Fat was valuable, but not guaranteed. Roots and tubers could provide starch, but they required effort and often preparation. The body received energy through a world that resisted it. Modern food can remove much of that resistance. It can be soft, dense, sweet, salty, fatty, cheap, available, and fast. It can enter the body without the old cost of searching and moving. This difference is central to diseases such as obesity and type 2 diabetes. The ancient body expected energy to be tied to work and uncertainty. The modern environment can deliver energy with almost no uncertainty at all. In a hunter-gatherer setting, movement was not a separate category called fitness. It was woven into eating, sheltering, caring, traveling, and staying alive. Muscles were active before food, after food, and between food. That matters because muscle is one of the body's great places for handling sugar. When muscles work often, they help draw glucose from the blood and use stored energy. When muscles sit unused for long periods, the same amount of incoming food can create a different internal burden. Blood sugar rises more often. Insulin has to speak louder. Fat cells store more. The liver handles more surplus. Over many years, the body can become less responsive to signals that once kept energy balanced. Ancient humans were not protected by perfect diets. They were protected in part by a life in which the body could not easily separate calories from exertion. The structure of daily existence kept reconnecting the two. This is why it would be misleading to say that ancient humans simply ate better in a modern moral sense. Their diets varied widely by place and season. Some groups ate more animal foods. Some relied more on plants, fish, shellfish, nuts, seeds, roots, or gathered fruits. Ice Age people in cold regions faced different options from people near tropical rivers or coastlines. There was no single ancient menu, but across many ancient environments, highly refined food was rare or absent, and constant access was limited. Food often came with fiber, chewing, irregular timing, and physical effort. These features slowed the body's encounter with energy. They did not make life easy. They made the body work within natural boundaries. Today, many feared diseases grow because those boundaries have become weak or invisible. A person can be surrounded by food while doing very little physical work. A person can drink calories quickly, eat late under artificial light, and repeat the same pattern through thousands of days. The body receives the message of plenty, but not the balancing message of demand. The heart, pancreas, liver, blood vessels, and fat tissue all listen to that pattern. Slowly, the pattern becomes physiology. Ancient humans rarely lived long inside that exact arrangement. Their world interrupted it with hunger, movement, weather, distance, and seasonal change. So the difference was not that ancient bodies were free from disease. It was that the diseases many people fear today needed a continuous modern rhythm that ancient life usually refused to provide. The most misleading way to think about ancient health is to imagine a perfect diet hidden somewhere in the past. There was no such single diet. Human beings spread across forests, coasts, grasslands, deserts, mountains, rivers, and cold northern landscapes, and each place gave them different foods. Some people lived close to fish and shellfish. Some followed grazing animals. Some gathered roots, seeds, nuts, berries, leaves, eggs, insects, and honey when they could. Some groups ate more meat in harsh climates, while others depended heavily on plant foods where plants were abundant. The ancient human body was not shaped by one menu but by flexibility. It had to use what the land offered. Yet beneath that variety there was one important pattern. Food was usually less processed, less constant, and harder to overconsume than much of what surrounds us today. This is where heart disease, obesity, and diabetes begin to look different. A wild tuber is not the same as a soft, refined starch eaten quickly in a warm room. A handful of seasonal fruit is not the same as a sweet drink that can be swallowed in minutes. Meat from a hunted animal is not the same as unlimited high-calorie food available at every hour. The ancient meal was tied to chewing, fiber, water, bone, shell, skin, season, distance, and labor. These were not small details. They changed how fast energy entered the body. They changed how full a person felt. They changed how often the body had to manage large waves of sugar and fat. Near the beginning of human life, the body did not meet food as a smooth flood. It met food as uneven pieces of a landscape. A nut had to be cracked. A root had to be dug. A shell had to be opened. A carcass had to be cut, shared, and used before it spoiled. Fruit had to be found at the right time. Honey, if collected, could require risk and knowledge. These physical limits shaped eating before any idea of health existed. A modern person may think of diet as a private decision, but for ancient humans, diet was a negotiation with weather, tools, group knowledge, and the living world around them. Because of this, many people in the deep past probably experienced cycles of more and less, rather than one steady level of intake. The body could store during better times and spend during harder times. Fat was not simply a problem, it was insurance. Appetite was not an enemy, it was guidance. But insurance becomes different when the emergency rarely comes. Guidance becomes different when the signal is constantly triggered by foods engineered to be easy to eat. In modern settings, the body can receive high energy with little fiber, little chewing, little delay, and little physical cost. The blood sugar can rise quickly. The pancreas can be asked to release insulin again and again. The liver can process surplus beyond what earlier rhythms commonly demanded. Fat tissue can grow from temporary reserve into long-term burden. Blood vessels can be exposed to pressure, inflammation, and metabolic strain across decades. Ancient humans were not protected from all of this by purity. They were protected, partly, by inconvenience. The land made eating slower. Scarcity made surplus temporary. Movement made storage useful. Spoilage made hoarding limited. Sharing made food social, not endlessly private. A person could not easily sit alone with constant access to soft, dense calories for years. This difference does not mean we should worship the past or reject the present. Modern food systems prevent famine, support cities, feed children, and keep many people alive through seasons that would once have been deadly. But the same food systems can also create a world where the body's old defenses are confused. The human appetite still honors sweetness as rare. The reward system still marks fat and salt as valuable. The energy system still stores for later. The muscles still expect to use what the mouth receives. When later never becomes lean and movement no longer balances intake, the ancient logic turns quietly against the modern body. So the reason ancient humans rarely developed these feared diseases in the same pattern is not because their lives were clean or easy. Their lives placed more friction between desire and excess. The body that once survived by taking advantage of every valuable food now lives, in many places, inside a landscape where valuable food never stops appearing, and the old limits have become silent. One of the quiet truths about heart disease, obesity, and diabetes is that they are not only diseases of the body, they are diseases of a certain kind of time. They need years of repetition. They need the same signals to return again and again until the body begins to treat imbalance as normal. A blood vessel does not usually harden in a single season. The pancreas does not usually struggle after one sweet meal. Fat does not become a lasting burden from one winter of plenty. These conditions often grow when ancient systems are asked to live inside a modern rhythm without pause. This is why the life of early humans matters so deeply to the question, Near the beginning of our species, the body rarely received the same metabolic message every day of the year. Food changed, movement changed, temperature changed, light changed, work changed. The body moved through cycles, and those cycles kept disturbing any single pattern before it could become too permanent. A person might eat more after a successful hunt, then less during a difficult stretch. A group might find fruit when the season allowed it, then return to tougher foods, roots, seeds, fish, shellfish, or whatever the land offered next. A body might store energy during better days, then spend it during walking, carrying cold nights and leaner weeks. This movement between enough and not enough was not comfortable, and it could become dangerous, but it made the inner world of the body less static. Modern disease often grows inside static conditions. Too much food that is too easy, too little movement that lasts too long, too much stress without physical release, too much light after dark, too much sitting without the old interruptions of ground, weather, hunger, and distance. The ancient body was not always healthier, but it was rarely allowed to remain in one artificial state for decades. This difference can be seen most clearly in how energy moved. In an early human life, calories did not simply arrive. They passed through a chain of action. Someone had to know where food might be, walk there, search, gather, dig, track, catch, cut, carry, cook, share, and eat before spoilage or competition changed the situation. Each step used attention and muscle. Each step took time. The body met energy after effort, not before it. Today, that order is often reversed. Energy can arrive first, and effort may never come. This reversal is small in a single day, but enormous across years. Blood sugar rises, but muscle may not demand much of it. Fat is stored, but the lean season may not retincone. The heart circulates blood through a body that is alive but underused. The liver manages surplus more often than shortage. The brain continues to reward dense food because, for most of human history, dense food meant survival. None of these systems are foolish. They are ancient and practical. They were shaped in a world where the next meal was not promised. But when the promise becomes constant, practicality can become pressure. This is why it is too simple to say that ancient humans rarely got these diseases because they ate naturally. The deeper point is that their whole environment kept forcing the body back into balance, often through hardship. Hunger limited excess. Movement used stored fuel. Darkness shaped rest. Cold demanded heat. Distance slowed desire. Seasons changed what was available. Tools and teeth placed physical effort between the person and the meal. The body had to negotiate with the world before it could consume the world. In modern life, negotiation is often reduced. A person can eat without waiting, sit without moving, stay warm without shivering, stay awake without darkness, and feel stress without any direct action that ends it. The diseases that follow are not signs that the human body suddenly became weak. They are signs that the body is still ancient in a world that has removed many of its old boundaries. Ancient humans feared hunger, wounds, infection, cold, childbirth, predators, accidents, and uncertain seasons. They did not live gently, but many of the diseases we fear today needed exactly what ancient life rarely provided: long-term surplus, low physical demand, stable comfort, and enough years for quiet imbalance to become visible. Their world was harsher, but its harshness interrupted the slow chain of modern disease before that chain could settle deeply into the body. One of the coldest explanations for why ancient humans rarely showed many of the diseases we fear today is that many of them did not live long enough, or steadily enough, for those diseases to fully appear. This is not a comforting truth, but it is an important one. Modern people often think of illness as something that attacks a body from outside, like a germ, a poison, or a sudden failure. But many of the diseases feared today are slow accumulations. They need years of blood moving under pressure, years of cells dividing and copying themselves, years of tiny damage in blood vessels, years of sugar, fat, inflammation, sleep loss, stress, and age pressing on the same organs. A body can carry the beginning of these changes long before anyone feels sick. Ancient humans had bodies capable of aging, capable of cancer, capable of vascular damage, capable of weakness and decline. They were not made from another kind of flesh, but their lives were often interrupted before the slowest diseases could become the main story. Near the beginning of human life, danger was closer to the surface. A child could die from infection, hunger, exposure, or dehydration. A young adult could die from a wound that modern medicine would clean and close. A mother could die in childbirth. A broken bone could change the rest of a life. A bad tooth could become a serious infection. A winter, a drought, a fall, a conflict, or a contaminated meal could matter more immediately than a disease that needs 50 or 60 years to show itself clearly. This does not mean no one reached old age. Some people did, and older people may have carried knowledge that helped the group survive. Where water remained in dry seasons, which plants were useful, how animals moved, which stories warned against danger, how children should be cared for. But the shape of the whole population was different. There were fewer old bodies compared with many modern societies. When fewer people reach the ages where heart disease, dementia, many cancers, and degenerative conditions become common, those diseases naturally leave a lighter mark on the visible pattern of sickness. This is one reason the past can mislead us if we look at it too simply. A disease can be rare not because the body was perfectly protected, but because life was too dangerous in other ways. Ancient people may have escaped some modern illnesses by living in a harsher world, not a healthier one. Their world filtered illness through age. The young faced infections, injuries, parasites, hunger, and birth-related dangers. The old, when they survived, still carried the ordinary costs of time: worn joints, damaged teeth, healed fractures, weakened bodies, and probably some diseases that leave little trace in bone. Archaeology can show us some of these marks, but not all of them. Soft organs disappear, blood vessels disappear, many cancers leave no clear sign after death. A brain changed by dementia leaves little direct evidence in the ground. So we must speak carefully. Ancient humans may have had some diseases we cannot easily see, yet the broader pattern remains. Many feared diseases of the modern world are tied strongly to longer life. Modern medicine has given more people the chance to reach ages where slow diseases can unfold. That is not a failure of medicine. It is partly the price of survival. When infections are treated, births are safer, wounds are repaired, and children live, the body gets more time. More time means more memory, more family, more experience, and more human possibility. It also means more years for quiet biological errors to gather. The ancient body often lived under immediate tests. The modern body often survives those tests and then meets delayed ones. In this way, the question becomes less simple and more honest. Ancient humans did not rarely get the diseases we fear today because they were untouched by weakness. They rarely revealed many of them because their world was organized around different risks, different ages, and different endings. Some diseases belong to abundance, some belong to crowding, some belong to infection, and some belong, very quietly, to the gift and burden of living long enough. Age changes the meaning of disease. A wound is dangerous at any age, but a hardened artery usually needs time. A fever can take a child quickly, but dementia usually belongs to many later years. A broken bone can happen in a moment, but many cancers require long chains of cellular copying, repair, failure, and survival before they become large enough to threaten life. This is why the ancient world must be understood through the shape of its population, not only through the strength of its bodies. In many early human groups there were children, young adults, some mature adults, and some older people, but the balance was not like a modern society filled with large numbers of people living into their 70s, 80s, or beyond. A small group moving through a landscape carried fewer old bodies because so many dangers arrived earlier. Infant death, childhood infection, accidents, difficult births, wounds, hunger, and exposure changed the age structure before the slowest diseases could gather their full weight. This is not a sign that the ancient body defeated disease. It is a sign that life gave disease less time to become old. Near the beginning of human history, survival was often decided by events that modern life can now soften or prevent. Clean water, antibiotics, surgery, safer childbirth, vaccination, emergency care, and reliable food have allowed millions of people to pass through dangers that once cut life short. When a child survives an infection, when a mother survives childbirth, when a wound is cleaned and stitched, when a broken limb is set, when hunger is prevented by stored food or social systems, life continues. That continuation is a human victory, but it also opens a longer road for other illnesses. The body is not a machine that remains unchanged just because earlier dangers are removed. It is living tissue under time. Cells divide. Immune responses shift. Vessels stiffen. Hormones change. Joints wear. Repair systems become less perfect. The longer a person lives, the more opportunities there are for small errors to correct. Ancient humans had these same basic biological limits, but fewer people travelled far enough down that road for age-related disease to dominate the whole picture of sickness. This is especially important for diseases that are now feared because they are common among older populations. Cancer, for example, is not one disease, and it can appear at many ages, but many cancers become more likely as the body grows older. Dementia is also strongly tied to age, even though not every older person develops it. Cardiovascular disease can begin earlier, but its most severe forms often reflect long exposure to blood pressure, inflammation, diet, genetics, stress, and time. If fewer ancient people lived long enough for these pressures to accumulate, then the disease would seem rarer, even if the body was still vulnerable in principle. The silence of the past is not always protection. Sometimes it is missing evidence. Sometimes it is a life cut short before a later illness could speak. Bones can preserve fractures, arthritis, infections, dental wear, and signs of hard labour, but they do not preserve everything. A person could have died with diseased arteries, a growing tumour, or declining memory, and the earth might leave little trace of it. This is why we must avoid a simple story. It would be false to say ancient humans never had cancer, heart problems, or age-related decline. It would also be false to imagine that every modern disease is only a modern invention. The more careful truth is that many feared diseases became more visible when more people began surviving long enough, living densely enough, and eating steadily enough for them to emerge in large numbers. The ancient world selected its suffering differently. It placed more weight on the young, the injured, the hungry, the exposed, and the infected. The modern world, after reducing many of those threats, places more weight on the long-lived body carrying years of quiet accumulation. From the viewpoint of deep history, this is a strange exchange. We have escaped many immediate dangers that ancient humans feared, but we now meet diseases that often require the very thing our ancestors struggled to obtain: more years. The diseases we fear today are not only signs of weakness. Some are signs that human beings have lived long enough for the body's slower shadows to appear. There is a quiet sadness in the idea that some ancient diseases were hidden by early death. When we say that ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today, it can sound at first like a sign of strength. But sometimes rarity is not strength. Sometimes it is absence of time. A body that dies from infection at 25 never has the chance to show the disease it might have carried at 70. A mother who dies in childbirth never becomes an old woman with fragile bones or failing memory. A child taken by fever leaves no long medical history behind. The ancient world did not erase the possibility of slow disease. It often ended the story before slow disease could become visible. This matters because it keeps the whole question honest. We are not looking back at a cleaner human body. We are looking at a different arrangement of risk. Near the beginning of the human story, death was often close to practical events. A wound, a birth, a spoiled food source, a cold season, a fall, a tooth infection, a failed hunt, a dry landscape, a conflict, or an illness that no one had the tools to treat. The body might have had the early beginnings of something modern people fear, but another danger could arrive first. In this way, the ancient world did not always prevent disease. It often outran it. A slow illness needs a long road. Many ancient lives were forced to travel shorter roads. This is why the diseases of old age appear more clearly in modern societies. More people survive the first years of life. More people survive infections. More people survive childbirth. More people survive wounds, broken bones, hunger, and dangerous seasons. More people reach the ages where the body's long memory becomes visible. The heart remembers years of pressure. The joints remember years of carrying. The brain remembers tiny changes in blood flow, sleep, inflammation, and cellular repair. The immune system changes with time. The cells carry the history of copying themselves again and again. In a modern hospital, an old person with heart disease, cancer, or dementia is not simply proof that modern life ruined the body. That person is also proof that earlier dangers were survived. The body stayed alive long enough to meet a slower kind of danger. Ancient humans often did not have that same chance. Their suffering was not less real, only arranged differently across time. A skeleton from long ago may show worn teeth, healed fractures, damaged joints, signs of infection, or stress from difficult growth. These traces tell us that ancient bodies endured hardship. But many feared diseases today leave weak traces after death, especially when soft tissue is gone. A tumor may not mark bone. Diseased arteries may vanish with flesh. A failing memory leaves no clear footprint in the soil. Pain, fatigue, shortness of breath, confusion, and many internal illnesses can disappear from the archaeological record. So silence in the bones is not always silence in life. The past can look healthier than it was because many kinds of suffering did not fossilize. Still, the broad pattern remains important. The ancient environment gave stronger opportunity to immediate threats, while the modern environment gives stronger opportunity to delayed threats. This does not make one world simply better than the other. It shows how deeply disease depends on context. When people lived in small groups, moved often, ate irregularly, and faced direct physical hazards, the body's greatest dangers often came quickly. When people began living longer, eating more steadily, working less physically, surviving infections, and reaching older ages, slower diseases could move to the front. The human body did not need to become a different species for this change to happen. The same flesh, given a different lifespan and a different environment, begins to reveal different weaknesses. This is the deeper lesson of age. Modern medicine did not merely add years at the end of life. It changed which illnesses had time to appear. It moved many people past dangers that once acted like gates. Beyond those gates were other diseases, waiting not as monsters, but as possibilities inside time. Ancient humans rarely saw many of these possibilities, because life often stopped before reaching them. We see them more clearly because, in many places, life continues. The diseases we fear today are therefore not only signs of modern damage, some are shadows cast by survival itself. The longer the human story lasts inside one body, the more that body has to carry the cost of having continued. A disease does not spread only because it exists. It also needs a path. It needs bodies close enough, often enough, long enough, for one infection to pass into another, and then another. This is one of the most important differences between much of ancient human life and the world that came later. For a very long time, humans lived in small groups, moving through landscapes rather than gathering permanently in large towns. Their camps might shift with seasons, food, water, animals, weather, and memory. People certainly touched one another, cared for one another, shared food, slept near one another, and carried infections within groups. Ancient life was not free from contagion. A cough, a wound infection, a stomach illness, or a parasite could move through a small band and cause real suffering. But many of the great diseases that terrify human imagination need something more than a small band. They need density. They need repeated contact. They need enough new people, especially children, to keep the chain alive after older people have either recovered or died. In a tiny, mobile group, some infections would burn through the available bodies and then disappear. The human community was too small to keep feeding them. Near the beginning of the human story, this mattered deeply. A group of foragers might number only dozens, not thousands. Neighboring groups might meet, exchange partners, share information or compete, but they were not packed together every day in streets, houses, markets, barracks, schools, and crowded rooms. There were no large cities where breath, waste, water, insects, animals, and human hands moved through dense networks hour after hour. There were no long corridors of constant strangers. There were no ships or caravans carrying infection across continents at the speed of trade. Disease still existed, but the road beneath disease was shorter. The ancient landscape placed distance between groups, and distance can be a kind of barrier. Not a perfect barrier, but a real one. This is why many epidemic diseases became far more successful after humans began farming, settling, storing food, living with animals, and building dense communities. A pathogen that struggles to remain alive in a small moving band can thrive when thousands of people live close together, when children are born continually into the population, when waste accumulates, when water is shared, and when animals live near human homes. The disease is not only a biological invader, it is also a traveller through human organisation. Change the organisation, and the traveller finds new roads. Ancient humans rarely faced some of the diseases we fear today because their social world had not yet become a vast system of roads for infection. Their small numbers did not make them safe from all sickness. They made certain kinds of sustained epidemics spread harder. This distinction is important because it keeps us from making the past too clean. A small group can be devastated by illness. A child with diarrhea can die quickly without clean water and care. A respiratory infection can be dangerous in cold weather. Parasites can weaken bodies over time. A wound can become infected after contact with soil or tools. But these dangers often remained local, tied to a body, a camp, a water source, a season, or a small set of people. Later, when human beings began living in larger settlements, disease could become less local. It could become a feature of the whole population. One sick person could become 10, then 100, then many more, because the social landscape allowed it. The first humans did not choose small group life as disease prevention. They lived that way because food, tools, movement, and ecology made it possible and necessary. But the result was that many pathogens had fewer chances to become permanent companions. A disease that requires a steady supply of susceptible bodies cannot easily survive if the group is small and isolated. Once everyone vulnerable has been exposed, the chain may stop. In a city, the chain may continue because new people are always entering it. Births, migration, trade, crowding, and social mixing keep offering the disease another body. So the ancient pattern of illness was shaped by space. Wide landscapes, scattered groups, temporary camps, and fewer strangers changed what infection could become. Modern fear often imagines disease as an invisible enemy floating everywhere, but for much of human history, disease was constrained by the smallness of human networks. The body was exposed to dirt, smoke, wounds, insects, spoiled food, and parasites. Yet it was not always exposed to the enormous human density that later made epidemic disease so powerful. The ancient world was dangerous in many ways, but for some infections it was too empty, too scattered, and too broken into small circles to give them the endless human chain they needed. Crowding changes the life of a disease. The same infection that struggles to continue in a small moving group can become powerful when human beings begin to live close together, sleep close together, drink from the same sources, touch the same surfaces, breathe the same indoor air, and leave waste near the places where they eat and rest. This is one of the great turning points in the history of sickness. For most of human existence, people did not live in cities. They did not live surrounded by thousands of strangers. Their daily world was made of relatives, companions, familiar neighbouring groups, animals in the landscape, seasonal camps, paths, water sources, and temporary shelters. They could still become sick, and some illnesses could pass quickly through a band, but the disease had fewer doors to move through. Once it had reached the small number of available bodies, its path could close. There might be no crowded market waiting nearby, no school full of children, no army camp, no ship, no dense village, no permanent settlement, with fresh hosts arriving again and again. The smallness of early human life did not make it gentle. It made infection more limited in space. Near the beginning of our species, a cough was not connected to a city. A stomach illness was not connected to a sewer system. A fever was not connected to trade routes crossing large regions. Sickness existed inside short human networks. The body met danger from wounds, water, parasites, smoke, insects, spoiled food, and close contact, but it did not always live inside the large social machinery that later allowed epidemic diseases to continue for generations. A pathogen needs more than a body. It needs a pattern of bodies. It needs contact arranged in the right way. It needs people close enough that the chain does not break. When humans were scattered across wide landscapes, the chain often had weak links. Distance, movement, and small group size could break transmission before it became a lasting population disease. This is why the growth of villages, towns, and cities did not simply change where humans slept. It changed what kinds of sickness could survive among them. With permanent settlement came shared waste, standing water, stored grain, rodents, insects, domesticated animals, and repeated contact among larger numbers of people. These conditions created new roads for microbes. Water could carry them. Food stores could attract animals that carried them. Crowded homes could pass them through breath. Children born into dense communities could become the next vulnerable bodies after earlier waves had passed. In a small foraging band, an acute infection might disappear after running out of people to infect. In a growing settlement, the same kind of disease could keep finding new bodies. This does not mean ancient foragers lived without infectious disease. That would be false. They could suffer from respiratory illness, stomach illness, skin infections, parasites, infected wounds, and many other dangers. But the most famous crowd diseases of later history needed a human world that was more crowded, more settled, and more connected. The human body was the same basic kind of body, but the social environment had become denser. Disease followed the shape of that environment. Imagine a camp that moves when food changes. Smoke rises, tools lie near the fire, children stay close to adults, and people know the faces around them. Now imagine a later settlement where many households remain in one place, where waste gathers, where animals sleep near people, where grain is stored, where paths are worn into the ground by daily traffic, where visitors arrive, where water is drawn again and again from the same places. The second world gives disease more memory. It leaves traces for microbes to use. It repeats contact. It allows contamination to return. It keeps bodies near one another long enough for infection to become part of the place itself. This is a major reason ancient humans in their earlier and more mobile forms of life rarely faced some diseases in the same way later populations did. Their world was not clean, but it was less permanently concentrated. Their waste did not always accumulate beside them for years. Their camps did not always hold thousands of people. Their social circles did not constantly renew the supply of vulnerable hosts. Modern people sometimes fear disease as if it floats freely outside history, but disease has always depended on human arrangements. The ancient arrangement was smaller, wider, and more broken by distance. Later arrangements became larger, tighter, and more continuous. The path beneath infection changed, and with it, the kinds of diseases that could become common changed as well. The smallness of early human groups did more than limit the spread of infection. It changed the meaning of being sick. In a modern world, disease can move through systems that are larger than any one person can see. A virus can pass through airports, cities, schools, factories, hospitals, buses, shared apartments, and crowded events. A contaminated food product can travel far from the place where it was made. A water system can connect thousands or millions of bodies through the same hidden channel, but for much of human existence, sickness remained closer to the scale of the group. It belonged to a camp, a family, a path, a riverbank, a bad carcass, a season, a cluster of insects, or a shared shelter. This did not make it mild. It made it bounded. A fever could frighten everyone near the fire. A stomach illness could weaken several people at once. A wound could become a serious danger because there were no antibiotics, no sterile tools, no surgical ward waiting in the distance. But the disease did not always have the social machinery to become a vast wave. Near the beginning of the human story, the world was spacious in a way that later humans would slowly leave behind. Human numbers were lower, camps were scattered, movement was normal. Contact between groups happened, but not with the constant density of later towns and cities. This meant that many infections encountered dead ends. A pathogen could reach one body, then a few more, then run out of easy passage. The chain could break because there were not enough people close enough together. In this sense, distance was not just geography. It was part of the immune landscape of early humanity. The land itself stood between one group and another. Forests, rivers, dry plains, mountains, cold seasons, and the simple difficulty of travel all shaped what disease could do. When people later began to live in larger settlements, this protective distance weakened. The body did not change overnight, but the network around the body changed. A cough in one home could reach another home quickly. Waste could stay near water. Animals could remain near sleeping spaces. Stored grain could attract rodents. Children could gather repeatedly in the same places. Traders, migrants, soldiers, and visitors could bring microbes from elsewhere. Disease gained memory because settlements remained in place. It gained continuity because more people were born into the same community. It gained reach because roads, markets, and exchange connected one population to another. Ancient mobile groups had many hardships, but they often denied pathogens this kind of continuity. They did not offer endless rooms, endless hosts, and endless repeated contact in the same compact space. This is why the phrase, "rarely got the diseases we fear today," must be understood carefully. It does not mean ancient people were protected from infection by nature's kindness. Nature was not kind. It means that certain diseases, especially those that depend on dense and sustained transmission, had fewer chances to become common before large settlements existed. The sickness of a small group might be intense, but it was less likely to become a civilization-wide pattern. A disease that needs a crowd cannot easily thrive where there is no crowd. A disease that needs constant replacement of vulnerable hosts cannot easily remain where groups are small and separated. A disease that spreads through waste and shared water becomes more powerful when waste and water are tied to a permanent settlement. The first humans lived with dirt, smoke, parasites, insects, blood, birth, death, and close physical care, but they did not always live with the massive human concentration that later reshaped infection. Their danger came from contact with the natural world and with their own small circle. Later, danger increasingly came from the human world humans had built together. This is one of the deep shifts in the history of disease. The body began in scattered bands where infection often had to fight against distance. Then human beings slowly created villages, towns, cities, trade routes, and empires where infection could travel through the same connections that carried food, tools, stories, and wealth. The roads that joined people also joined their illnesses. The walls that protected people also held waste and breath together. The markets that fed people also mixed strangers. The settlement that made life more stable also gave some diseases a stable home. Ancient humans did not escape sickness. They lived inside a different architecture of sickness. Their world was dangerous, but it was not yet built to help every disease move without stopping. Farming did not simply give human beings more food. It changed the relationship between food, place, animals, waste, work, and disease. For millions of years before farming, human life moved through landscapes where food was gathered, hunted, fished, dug, carried, and followed. Then, in several regions of the world, people slowly began to remain closer to certain plants, certain animals, and certain places. This was not one sudden invention, and it did not happen everywhere in the same way. It was a long transition, shaped by climate, local ecology, population pressure, knowledge, accident, and repeated human choices. But once farming took root, the body entered a new kind of world. Food could be stored, families could remain in one area for longer, children could be born into more stable settlements, animals could live nearer to humans, fields could demand repeated labor, grain could fill storage pits. The human future became more predictable in some ways and less forgiving in others. Near the beginning of the human story, scarcity was often direct and seasonal. A group moved when food moved. A camp could be left behind when waste, insects, or danger made it less useful. But farming tied people more tightly to one place. That tie gave enormous advantages. It helped support larger populations. It allowed more children to survive in some conditions. It created stores for difficult seasons. It made possible villages, crafts, social memory, and eventually cities. Yet the same stability also opened doors for new forms of sickness. When people stay in one place, their traces stay with them. Waste accumulates. Water sources are used again and again. Grain attracts rodents and insects. Domesticated animals bring their own microbes, parasites, dung, and breath close to human homes. Crowding becomes more common. Diet may become more dependent on a smaller number of staple crops. The body receives more reliable calories, but sometimes less variety. This is why agriculture must be handled carefully in the story of disease. It was not simply a mistake. Without it, the later human world would not exist in the form we know. But it changed the disease environment so deeply that the old body began facing pressures that had been much less common in small, mobile groups. A hunter-gatherer diet could be uncertain, but often varied across seasons and landscapes. A farming diet could feed more people, but it could also narrow around grain or a few staple foods. This narrowing mattered for teeth, bones, growth, and resistance to illness. Softer, starchier foods could change the mouth. Stored carbohydrates could increase dental decay in some populations. Periods of crop failure could make whole communities vulnerable because many people depended on the same harvest. Living close to fields and animals could increase exposure to parasites and infectious organisms. The human body had always lived with microbes, but farming created new patterns of contact. It gathered humans, animals, waste, food stores and water into repeated loops. Disease likes loops. A contaminated hand returns to the same household. A polluted water source is used again tomorrow. A rodent enters the same grain store night after night. A child plays where animals have passed. A respiratory infection finds many bodies under nearby roofs. In earlier mobile life, some of these loops were shorter or broken by movement. In settled life, they could persist. The ancient diseases we fear less today, such as many infections of childhood, parasites, diarrheal illness, and diseases linked to crowding, became more favoured after settlement. This does not mean farming people were doomed, or that foragers lived in health. It means that the human disease map changed again. The body that had been shaped by movement, varied exposure, irregular food, and small groups now had to adjust to stored grain, repeated labour, shared water, animals near shelters, and growing communities. Farming made hunger less random in some ways, but it made sickness more organised. It placed disease into the architecture of daily life. A field could feed a village, and the village could shelter a disease. A grain store could protect against famine, and also attract the creatures that carried contamination. A settled home could protect a child from weather, and also keep that child close to the coughs, waste, and infections of many others. Human beings gained stability, but stability gave some diseases a place to return to. This is one of the deep reasons the diseases of later history were not simply waiting inside the human body. They needed the new world that human beings built around the body. The farming village changed disease because it changed what stayed behind. A moving camp leaves many things in the past. Ash, bones, broken tools, scraps of food, human waste, trampled ground, insects, smells, and the memory of illness may remain for a while, but the people move on. The place is not asked to hold the whole life of the group forever. Farming makes a different promise. It says, stay here, plant here, return here, store here, raise children here, keep animals here, build walls here, bury the dead near here, draw water here again tomorrow. That promise gave human beings stability, but it also gave disease something it had rarely had before, a home address. Near the beginning of human history, the body was tied to the landscape through movement. After farming, the body became tied to particular fields, paths, houses, wells, storage pits, and animal pens. The old human body, shaped by walking, searching, carrying, and seasonal change, now lived inside repeated contact with the same soil, the same water, the same waste, and the same domesticated animals. This repetition mattered because many forms of sickness do not need only one exposure. They need return. They need contamination that comes back into the mouth, the skin, the lungs, the gut, and the sleeping space day after day. In a settled village, waste could become part of the environment if it was not moved far away. Human waste, animal dung, rotting food, dirty water, and insects could form small, invisible circles around daily life. A child might play near places where animals had passed. A family might draw water from a source touched by runoff. Grain might be stored where rodents could enter. Smoke might hang inside shelters. Fleas, lice, mosquitoes, flies, worms, and other parasites could find repeated opportunity when bodies and waste remain near one another. None of this means people were careless or foolish. Early farmers worked with the knowledge they had, in conditions that were often difficult. They learned, adapted, cleaned, moved waste, chose sites, built storage, and managed animals as best they could. But the scale of the problem had changed. A small mobile group could leave a dirty camp. A farming community had invested labor into staying. The settlement itself became valuable, so people endured problems that movement might once have solved. This is one of the quiet costs of stability. The more permanent the home, the more permanent some risks became. Food storage shows the same double nature. Stored grain was a human breakthrough. It could carry a community through winter, drought, or a failed hunt. It supported children, elders, craftspeople, and larger populations. It allowed planning beyond the next few days. But stored grain also concentrated calories in one place, and other living things noticed. Rodents, insects, molds, and microbes could gather around the human storehouse. Grain could spoil, contamination could spread through supplies. Diet could narrow when a community relied heavily on one or two staple crops. The body received more dependable energy, but sometimes less variety. Teeth met more starch. The gut met repeated foods. Deficiencies could appear when harvests failed or diets became too narrow. The ancient forager could starve when the land failed, but the farmer could suffer when the crop failed, when storage failed, or when the same food fed too many bodies for too long. Disease followed these new dependencies. Animals brought another layer. Domestication changed human history, but it also brought people into closer contact with the bodies, breath, blood, milk, dung, parasites, and microbes of other species. For most of deep human time, animals were hunted, avoided, tracked, scavenged, respected, feared, or observed at a distance. With herding and settlement, some animals became near companions in human spaces. This closeness created many benefits: meat, milk, hides, traction, manure, transport, security, and wealth. It also created new biological bridges. Not every animal microbe becomes a human disease, and not every disease came from livestock. But close repeated contact increased the chances for infections to cross, adapt, and circulate. The human body had always lived among other living things, yet farming placed certain animals beside human families with a regularity that the older landscape had not demanded. So agriculture changed sickness by gathering life into tighter loops. Plant, field, animal, house, water, waste, child, grain, insect, and breath were now linked more closely. The diseases that grew from these loops were not punishments for progress. They were consequences of a new arrangement. Farming helped humans survive hunger in new ways, and at the same time helped some diseases survive humans in new ways. Stability fed the village, and the village fed stability to disease. Agriculture changed the human story because it gave people something rare in deep history, a stronger claim on tomorrow. A field could be planted with the hope that food would return months later. Grain could be stored with the hope that a difficult season might be survived. Animals could be kept with the hope that meat, milk, hides, labor, or manure would remain near the home. This new relationship with the future made larger communities possible. It helped children survive. It allowed older people to remain near settled families. It gave rise to villages, crafts, rituals, trade, and eventually the long road toward towns and cities. But every gain changed the disease landscape. The ancient forager lived with uncertainty, but uncertainty also broke many dangerous chains. The early farmer gained continuity, and continuity gave disease more chances to repeat itself. Near the beginning of human life, the body belonged to a world of movement, seasonal variety, and smaller groups. After farming, more bodies stayed near the same water, the same waste, the same animals, and the same stored food. This did not make farming wrong. It made it powerful. And powerful changes rarely bring only one result. A village could protect people from hunger and weather, while also placing them inside closer contact with infection. A storehouse could save a family from famine, while also inviting rodents, insects, mold, and contamination. A herd could provide food and wealth, while also bringing human skin, lungs, hands, and stomachs closer to the biological world of animals. A permanent home could hold memory and safety, while also holding smoke, parasites, and waste. The diseases that followed were not separate from progress. They were woven into the same structures that made progress possible. This is one reason ancient humans before farming rarely faced some diseases in the form that later populations did. Their bodies were not cleaner, but their living arrangements were less concentrated. Once humans began to gather in larger numbers, disease could use human success as a road. More food meant more people. More people meant more contact. More contact meant more opportunities for microbes to move. More children meant more new bodies, with little previous exposure. More settlement meant more repeated use of water, soil, houses, and paths. The old body was now surrounded by a new social machine. In that machine, sickness could become less like a passing event, and more like a resident of the community. This also helps explain why the story of disease cannot be reduced to one simple cause. It was not only diet, it was not only animals, it was not only waste, it was the arrangement of all these things together. A child in a farming village might breathe smoke from indoor fires, eat a grain-heavy diet, drink water affected by runoff, play near animals, sleep near siblings, and live among many people whose daily paths overlapped. None of these details alone tells the whole story. Together, they formed a new environment for the immune system, the gut, the lungs, the teeth, the bones, and the skin. The body still carried ancient defenses, but the exposures were now more regular and more concentrated. Earlier, humans had parasites, infections, injuries, and hunger, but many of their risks moved with them or faded when a camp was abandoned. Farmers often stayed, because staying was the point. The field needed return, the animals needed care, the house represented labor already spent. The grave of an ancestor, the stored grain, the cleared land, and the known water source all tied people to place. Disease could use that attachment. In a deep sense, farming gave humans roots, and some diseases grew around those roots. Yet it is important not to turn this into a story of loss alone. Agriculture also gave human beings the ability to feed populations that foraging could not support in the same way. It allowed culture to accumulate in new forms. It gave many communities resilience against certain kinds of hunger. It shaped the world we still live in. The cost was that the human body, once shaped by scattered life, now lived inside density, repetition, and dependence. So when we ask why ancient humans rarely got the diseases we fear today, farming stands as one of the great turning points. It did not create all disease, and it did not end human strength. It changed the stage. On that new stage, some old dangers weakened, and some new dangers learned how to stay. The closeness between humans and animals is older than farming, but farming changed its shape. For most of deep human history, animals were part of the surrounding world. They were watched from a distance, tracked by footprints, heard in the dark, hunted when possible, avoided when dangerous, scavenged when opportunity appeared, and remembered through stories, marks, and movement across land. Human bodies were always in contact with the living world. They touched hides, bones, blood, insects, soil, water, and plants. They were never separate from nature. But domestication created a new kind of nearness. Animals were no longer only out there, beyond the camp or across the valley. Some were brought into the human circle. They stood near shelters. They slept close to homes. They left dung where children walked. They shared water sources, paths, insects, air, and sometimes enclosed spaces with people. This new closeness did not happen everywhere at once, and it involved different animals in different regions. Sheep, goats, cattle, pigs, chickens, dogs, horses, camels, and other animals entered human life in different ways, over long periods of time. Each relationship brought benefits. Meat, milk, hides, wool, labor, transport, manure, guarding, companionship, and stored wealth all changed what human communities could do, but each relationship also created biological bridges. A microbe that once lived mainly in an animal population could now encounter human bodies more often. A parasite that passed through dung, soil, insects, or water could find repeated routes between animals and people. A respiratory organism could move more easily when animals and humans shared close air. A pathogen does not cross into humans just because contact exists, and many animal microbes never become human diseases, but repeated closeness increases the number of chances. Near the beginning of the human story, a hunter might handle the blood and flesh of a wild animal, But that contact was usually brief and tied to a kill, a carcass, or a season. In a farming village, contact could become daily. The animal was alive beside the human family. Its waste remained near the settlement. Its insects moved between bodies. Its milk, meat, wool, skin, breath, and shelter became part of human routine. This is one reason the diseases of later human societies were different from the diseases of small mobile groups. The issue was not that animals suddenly became dangerous. Animals had always carried their own worlds of microbes. The issue was that human settlement gave those microbial worlds more opportunities to meet ours again and again. A village with animals is not only a collection of people and livestock, it is a shared biological space. The same ground can carry footprints, dung, food scraps, spilled water, insects, and children's hands. The same storage area can draw rodents. The same roof can hold smoke, breath, warmth, and crowding. The same path can link pen, well, house, field, and refuse. Disease moves through such connections quietly. It does not need drama. It only needs repetition. Ancient humans before agriculture did have close contact with animals, especially through hunting, scavenging, butchering, and living in landscapes full of other species. Yet the older pattern often lacked the dense, settled, long-term mixture that domestication created. Once humans began keeping animals near them, some infections gained a new kind of patience. They could circulate in herds, pass through waste, be carried by insects, return through water, or adapt slowly in environments where human and animal lives overlapped. The body was the same human body, with immune defenses shaped by long exposure to the natural world. But the setting around that body had changed from occasional contact to repeated contact, from distance to enclosure, from wild encounter to managed nearness. This shift helps explain why ancient humans rarely faced some diseases that later became deeply tied to villages, towns, and animal husbandry. It also reminds us not to make the past too simple. Humans did not become sick because they left nature. In a sense, they became sick in new ways because they brought parts of nature closer, held them in place, and built daily life around them. The animal pen, the grain store, the well, the house, and the field became one connected environment. In that environment, disease did not need to search far. Human success had made life more stable, and stability gave microbes more chances to learn the shape of us. A village with animals did not only change the kinds of microbes humans met, it changed the rhythm of meeting them. A hunter might touch blood, hide, bone, and meat after a successful hunt, but the animal body was usually an event. It appeared, it was processed, it was eaten, used, shared, and gone. Domesticated animals were different. They remained. They had births, illnesses, wounds, parasites, waste, breath, milk, hair, feathers, and insects within the circle of human life. Their bodies became part of the background. A child could wake near them, walk through ground they had crossed, drink from water they had approached, and breathe air from spaces warmed by both human and animal bodies. This kind of repetition matters because disease often depends on repeated chance. Most contacts between humans and animals do not create new human diseases. Many microbes are limited to their own hosts. Many die before crossing. Many fail to adapt. But when contact happens day after day, year after year, across growing communities, rare chances become less rare. The ancient human body had always lived among other species, yet farming and herding turned occasional contact into a stable relationship. Near the beginning of human history, animals were part of the landscape. After domestication, some animals became part of the household economy. They were protected, bred, counted, traded, milked, slaughtered, and kept close because they were valuable. Their value brought them near. Their nearness changed disease. The same animal that could pull a plough or provide milk could also bring dung close to water. The same herd that represented wealth could carry parasites through soil. The same poultry yard that fed a family could gather feathers, droppings, insects, and human hands into a small space. The same pig pen, goat enclosure, cattle shed, or stable could become a place where different biological worlds touched repeatedly. This does not mean every farming settlement was diseased in the same way. Climate, animal species, water management, housing, diet, hygiene practices, and population size all mattered. Some communities adapted well. Some risks were recognized even without modern germ theory. People could separate animals, manage waste, choose cleaner water, use fire, smoke, fermentation, cooking, and cultural rules to reduce danger. But the larger historical shift remained. Humans had built places where the boundaries between species were thinner and more constant. That thinning helps explain why some later diseases became associated with dense settlement and animal husbandry. The human immune system was not helpless. It had deep experience with microbes, wounds, parasites, and environmental exposure. But no immune system acts outside context. It responds to the world it is given. A small mobile group gave it one pattern of exposure. A farming village with animals gave it another. The difference was not only the presence of pathogens, but the structure of opportunity around them. In a scattered foraging life, a pathogen might meet a person, then lose the path. In a dense settlement with animals, it might meet humans, livestock, insects, waste, water, and food stores in a connected loop. This loop could keep returning the same danger to the body. A contaminated hand could touch food. An insect could move from dung to skin. Runoff could carry waste toward a water source. A respiratory illness could pass between people living under nearby roofs. A parasite could use the soil around a settlement again and again. These are quiet pathways, not dramatic ones. They do not require a single catastrophe. They require nearness, repetition, and time. Ancient humans before large settlements still suffered from parasites and infections, but their world often broke loops by movement, distance, and smaller population size. The farming world strengthened loops by staying. The more human beings succeeded at holding animals, food, and people together, the more some diseases succeeded at holding on to humans. This is one of the paradoxes at the center of the story. The animals that helped people survive hunger also helped reshape sickness. The settlements that protected children from wandering hardship also increased contact among many bodies. The grain that fed the village attracted other creatures. The water that sustained life could carry waste back into life. The human body did not suddenly become weak. It entered a new biological neighborhood, and in that neighborhood, disease learned new routes through the ordinary things people depended on most. The new closeness between people and animals also changed the scale of fear. In a small mobile group, illness might be terrifying because help was limited, but it often remained tied to a narrow circle of bodies. In a settled world with livestock, stored food, crowded homes, and repeated paths, sickness could become larger than the household. It could move through the same relationships that made village life possible. The animal that belonged to one family could graze near another family's water source. The grain stored by one household could attract rodents that crossed into another. The insect that fed near dung could land on human skin. The traveler who came to trade animals, tools, or grain could bring more than goods. This is how the human world slowly became more connected, and how disease learned to follow connection. Near the beginning of the human story, contact with animals was part of the open landscape. After domestication, contact became part of the built landscape. Pens, paths, wells, houses, fields, storage spaces, and markets created a shared environment where human and animal life overlapped in stable ways. A disease did not need to leap dramatically from one species to another in a single moment to matter. Many risks grew from smaller, slower forms of contact. Waste returning through water, parasites cycling through soil, insects moving between bodies, respiratory infections spreading in close quarters, and food becoming contaminated before it reached the mouth. These routes were ordinary. They followed the habits of daily life. That is what made them powerful. The most important point is not that animals were enemies. Animals were among the greatest supports of human survival. Dogs helped with guarding and hunting. Goats, sheep, cattle, pigs, chickens, and other domesticated animals helped communities secure food, materials, labor, and wealth. Herds could buffer hunger. Milk could feed people in ways that changed nutrition. Manure could enrich fields. Animal strength could pull, carry, or plow. These advantages shaped human history deeply, but the same nearness that gave humans new security also gave microbes new opportunities. Disease often grows in the space between benefit and cost. The closer a useful animal stayed, the more often its biological world touched the human one. The larger the settlement became, the more those touches could multiply. A single family's exposure could become a community's exposure. A community's exposure could become a region's exposure once trade and travel strengthened the links between places. This helps explain why some diseases that later shaped history were far less suited to the earlier world of scattered bands. They needed populations large enough to maintain transmission, animals close enough to provide repeated exposure, and settlements stable enough to let contamination and infection return again and again. Ancient foragers could certainly get sick from animals. A hunter could be injured by prey. A scavenger could meet dangerous microbes in a carcass. A person could suffer parasites from water, soil, insects, or food. But those risks were often tied to particular encounters. In farming and herding communities, the encounter did not end. It became a routine. The animal was still there the next morning. The dung was still near the path. The water was drawn again. The grain store remained. The child returned to the same yard. The body's exposure became not a single meeting, but a pattern. Human disease changed when human life became patterned around animals and settlements. This does not mean ancient people before farming were healthier in every way. It means the diseases they faced were shaped by a looser architecture. After farming, that architecture tightened. The body stood at the center of a new circle. Loud livestock, grain, waste, water, insects, neighbors, trade, and birth. More children meant more vulnerable bodies. More food meant more people. More people meant more contact. More contact meant more pathways for infection. The village was a human achievement, but it was also a biological experiment. No one designed it that way. No one could see microbes. No one could know how many invisible exchanges were happening through breath, skin, gut, water, and food. Yet the effects accumulated. The human species began to live not only with animals, but with the disease possibilities created by keeping animals close. This is why the older question returns with a different shape. Ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today, not because they lived outside danger, but because some dangers had not yet been given the right structure. Domestication, villages, and later cities gave disease that structure. They turned useful closeness into biological closeness, and biological closeness into new roots of illness. The human body remained ancient, but it was now sleeping beside a world it had built, a world where survival and sickness had begun to share the same roof. Inflammation is one of the body's oldest forms of attention. It is the way flesh notices damage, danger, invasion, and repair. When a thorn opens the skin, when smoke irritates the lungs, when bacteria enter a wound, when a parasite settles in the gut, when tissue is bruised or torn, the body does not remain silent. Blood flow changes, heat rises, immune cells move toward the place of trouble, chemical messages spread. Pain tells the person to protect the damaged area. Swelling helps bring defense and repair. In the ancient world, this response could mean the difference between healing and dying. A small cut in a world without antibiotics was not small in the same way it is now. A tooth infection could become dangerous. A wound from stone, bone, thorn, animal bite, or fall could open a path for infection. Near the beginning of the human story, inflammation was not an abstract medical word. It was a survival tool, working quietly inside bodies that slept near smoke, walked barefoot or lightly covered over rough ground, handled hides and bones, ate food with natural contamination, and lived close to soil, water, insects, and other organisms. The body had to react quickly. It had to seal, burn, swell, clean, isolate, and repair. In that setting, a strong inflammatory response was not a mistake. It was protection. But the question changes when the same ancient tool is carried into a modern world. Many feared diseases today are not built from one dramatic wound. They are linked, in part, to low, steady forms of irritation inside the body. The flame does not rise high enough to feel like fever, but it may not fully go out. This kind of chronic inflammation is very different from the sharp response that closes a wound or fights an infection. It can sit quietly under the surface, connected with excess body fat, poor sleep, long stress, low movement, smoking, pollution, some infections, aging, and metabolic strain. The body remains slightly on guard, even when there is no single thorn to remove, no single cut to close, no animal bite to survive. Ancient humans certainly experienced inflammation. They likely experienced it often, and sometimes severely. Their bodies faced parasites, wounds, smoke exposure, dental infections, skin injuries, and difficult physical lives. But many of those inflammatory events were tied to clear pressures from the environment. The body fought, healed, failed, or moved through the crisis. In modern life, some inflammatory signals can become more constant because the pressures themselves become constant. A person may sleep too little for years. Stress may remain without physical release. Food may repeatedly deliver more energy than muscles use. Fat tissue, especially when expanded beyond what the body comfortably manages, can send chemical signals that keep immune activity slightly elevated. Long sitting reduces the old rhythm of muscular use. Artificial light can disturb sleep timing. The body is not facing a single visible enemy, but it is still receiving messages that something is wrong. This is where the ancient defense begins to look misplaced. The immune system evolved to protect a body moving through a world of wounds, microbes, hunger, weather, and direct danger. It did not evolve for a life where the danger is often delayed, internal, repetitive, and hard to name. The first humans did not have to interpret inflammation through blood tests or medical charts. They felt it as heat, pain, weakness, swelling, or fever. Today, some of the most important inflammatory burdens may be hidden for a long time. They may contribute quietly to heart disease, insulin resistance, some forms of cancer risk, joint problems, and age-related decline. This does not mean inflammation is bad. Without it, the body could not survive. It means that a protective fire can become harmful when it never fully rests. Ancient humans rarely carried some modern inflammatory diseases in the same pattern because their world did not create the same long, low background of surplus, stillness, sleep disruption, and abstract stress. Their world injured the body more openly. Ours may disturb it more quietly. The ancient body knew how to raise an alarm. The modern world has learned how to keep that alarm faintly ringing. There is a difference between a body that is attacked and a body that is never allowed to settle. Ancient humans knew the first kind of danger well. A cut on the foot, a thorn under the skin, a burn from fire, a cough after smoke, a bite from an insect, a stomach illness after bad water. These were clear enough to be felt. The body answered them with heat, pain, fever, swelling, fatigue, and repair. The alarm rose because there was something to answer. In a world close to the beginning of human life, the body often met danger in visible forms. The ground could break the skin, the weather could chill the muscles, food could carry parasites, smoke could roughen the lungs, birth could open the body to danger. These pressures were harsh, but they often had a direct shape. The body could locate them. It could send blood, immune cells, clotting, fever, and rest toward the problem. If the person survived, the alarm might fall again. The modern world has made many of these obvious dangers less deadly in many places. A wound can be cleaned, a fever can be treated, a birth can be assisted, a bacterial infection may be stopped, water can be purified, food can be inspected. These changes are real human achievements. But while some old dangers became less common or less fatal, another kind of pressure became easier to miss. It is the pressure of living in a body that receives small warning signals again and again, without a single clear wound to heal. A person may sit for long hours, sleep too little, eat more energy than the body spends, carry stress that never becomes physical action, breathe polluted air, live under artificial light, and feel worry that repeats without resolution. None of these may feel like a wound, yet the body can read them as strain. It can raise chemical signals. It can keep the immune system slightly awake. It can keep repair and defense systems active beyond their older rhythm. This is why chronic inflammation is so important in the story of modern disease. It is not the same as the hot, useful inflammation that helps close a cut. It is quieter. It may not be felt at first. It can move through fat tissue, blood vessels, the liver, joints, and other systems like a low fire under the floor. Ancient humans were not free from this kind of burden completely. They had stress, hunger, infection, smoke exposure, and injury. They could suffer long illness, but their pressures often rose and fell with more direct environmental events. Hunger came with movement and searching. Cold came with heat-making and sheltering. Fear came with visible danger. Fat stores rose in better times and could be used in leaner ones. The body's alarm system had more chances to complete its cycle. In many modern lives, the cycle is less complete. Stress may begin in thought and remain in thought. The body prepares for action, but the action may be impossible or socially inappropriate. Muscles tense, hormones rise, sleep becomes lighter, appetite changes, and the immune system receives a message that danger is present. But there is no animal to flee, no hill to climb, no firewood to carry, no direct ending to the signal. The danger can be an unpaid bill, a message on a screen, loneliness, work pressure, bad news, or fear of the future. The ancient body responds with ancient chemistry. Even when the danger belongs to a very new world, over years this can matter. Low movement can reduce the anti-inflammatory effects that working muscle helps create. Excess body fat can become more than stored energy. It can become active tissue sending signals to the immune system. Poor sleep can weaken the body's ability to quiet its alarms. Repeated high-energy meals can add metabolic strain. Stress can keep the nervous system alert long after the day should have softened into rest. None of these alone explains every disease, and no single simple cause should be forced onto complex illnesses. But together they help explain why modern bodies may carry inflammation in a different pattern from ancient bodies. The old immune system was built for a world of wounds, microbes, parasites, and repair. Today, it also has to interpret comfort without movement, food without scarcity, light without darkness, stress without action, and age without the same early limits. The diseases we fear today often grow in that uncertain space, where the body is safe from many old enemies, yet still quietly convinced that something is wrong. The body's alarm system becomes dangerous when it loses the rhythm of rising and falling. In ancient life, many alarms were sharp. A wound opened, and the body responded. A fever rose, and the body tried to burn through infection. A parasite entered, and the immune system adjusted. Smoke filled the lungs, cold tightened the skin, hunger narrowed attention, pain protected an injured limb. These signals were often difficult, but they belonged to a world where danger had shape. Something happened, the body answered, and then life either moved toward repair or toward failure. The cycle might be brutal, but it was still a cycle. In many modern diseases, the alarm is not always sharp enough to notice. It is low, repeated, and unfinished. A person may not feel sick, yet the body may be managing small inflammatory pressures day after day. Blood vessels may be irritated. Fat tissue may be sending chemical messages. Sleep may not fully restore the nervous system. Stress hormones may rise too often. The gut, liver, muscles, and immune cells may be trying to interpret a world that keeps giving mixed signals. There is comfort, but also strain. There is food, but also overload. There is safety, but also worry. There is rest, but not always recovery. This is one of the reasons ancient humans rarely developed many of the diseases we fear today in the same pattern. Their world was harsher, but many of its signals were more physically complete. Hunger was followed by movement. Cold was followed by heat-seeking. Fat was stored and later used. Fear often demanded action. Darkness arrived without needing permission. Sleep was not perfect, but it was more closely tied to the natural fall of light, temperature, and group quiet. Near the beginning of the human story, the body's alarms were embedded in the land. The land pressed, and the body answered. Modern life can press without giving the body the old path to answer. Stress may come through screens, money, memory, work, loneliness, news, or imagined futures. The body may still prepare as if the problem requires movement, but the person may remain seated. Muscles tense without running. The heart quickens without a climb. The stomach changes without a clear danger in front of it. The immune system receives nervous signals of threat, but the threat may not end in the ancient way. Over time, the alarm becomes background. This background can matter because inflammation is connected to many slow illnesses, including cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, some joint conditions, and aspects of aging. It is not the single cause of everything, and it should not be used as a simple explanation for all sickness. Human disease is shaped by genetics, infections, diet, sleep, environment, age, social conditions, chance, and medical care. But inflammation helps connect the ancient body to the modern world. It shows how a defense can become a burden when the setting changes. The immune system did not evolve to be quiet all the time. It evolved to listen carefully. If the world repeatedly whispers that something is wrong, the body may keep listening. Ancient humans had their own long burdens. Chronic infections, parasites, smoke exposure, dental disease, old injuries, and repeated physical hardship could keep inflammation active in painful ways. The past was not a clean state. Yet many modern inflammatory patterns are tied to conditions that became common only recently in human history. Long sedentary days, high and continuous energy intake, disturbed sleep, artificial light at night, pollution, long psychological stress, and far more years of life. The ancient body was not free from fire. It knew fire well, but the modern body may carry a smaller flame for much longer. That is the difference. A large flame can destroy quickly. A low flame can change the structure of a house before anyone sees smoke. So when we ask why ancient humans rarely got the diseases we fear today, inflammation gives us a quieter answer. They were not less vulnerable to injury or infection. They simply lived inside pressures that often rose, struck, and passed. While many modern pressures linger, the body still uses its old alarm, but now the alarm may ring in a room that looks safe, during a life that feels ordinary, under a surface that appears calm. Sleep is one of the places where the modern body most clearly reveals its age. A person may lie in a soft bed, inside a safe room, under a roof, with food nearby and no predator outside the door. Yet the body may still fail to settle. The eyes close, but the mind keeps moving. The room is dark enough to seem like night, but a screen has already told the brain that the day is not finished. The stomach may still be working through a late meal. The heart may still be carrying stress from a message, a task, a fear, or a memory. This kind of sleeplessness feels modern because the setting is modern, but the body inside it is much older. For most of human history, sleep did not happen inside a world of clocks, electric lights, screens, alarms, and indoor temperature control. It happened under the authority of the sun, fire, weather, darkness, sound, group safety, hunger, cold, and fatigue. Near the beginning of the human story, the body learned time from the sky before it learned time from numbers. Morning light entered the eyes and helped set the rhythm of wakefulness. Evening darkness lowered the world into rest. Temperature changed. The group quieted. Firelight may have extended the evening, but it did not imitate the brightness and color of modern artificial light. The night was not perfectly peaceful. Ancient humans could wake, listen, shift position, tend a fire, soothe a child, or respond to danger. Sleep was likely flexible, sometimes broken, sometimes shared, sometimes shaped by season and safety. But it was still anchored to natural signals that modern life has weakened. This matters because sleep is not only rest, it is part of metabolism, immunity, memory, hormone regulation, repair, appetite, blood pressure, and emotional balance. When sleep is repeatedly shortened, delayed, or disturbed, the body does not treat it as a small inconvenience forever. It begins to change the way it handles energy, stress, and inflammation. Ancient humans did not sleep perfectly, and we should not imagine them as peaceful figures resting every night under friendly stars. Their nights could be cold, smoky, noisy, dangerous, and uncomfortable. But their bodies were not usually being asked to ignore night itself. Modern humans often are. Artificial light can push wakefulness later. Screens can hold attention past the body's older signals. Work schedules can separate sleep from darkness. Social demands can pull the body away from sunrise and sunset. Food can arrive late, when the digestive system might otherwise be slowing. The brain can receive news, conflict, and stimulation at hours when ancient darkness would have narrowed the world. In this way, the modern night becomes strangely bright and crowded. The body lies down, but the environment keeps speaking. The first humans did not need to understand circadian biology to live inside it. Their days and nights were organized by the planet itself. Light, darkness, temperature, and activity rose and fell around them. This rhythm did not protect them from all disease, but it gave their bodies a steady pattern to read. Today, the pattern can become confusing. A person may see little sunlight in the morning, sit indoors for most of the day, look at bright screens at night, eat late, sleep irregularly, and wake by alarm before full rest has returned. The body receives mixed messages about when to be alert, when to digest, when to repair, and when to lower its guard. Over years, this can connect with diseases we fear today, not as one single cause, but as part of a larger modern arrangement. Poor sleep can increase appetite, reduce insulin sensitivity, raise stress responses, affect blood pressure, and keep inflammation more active. The ancient body was built to follow cycles. Modern life can flatten those cycles into an endless half-day, where the body never fully enters night and never fully earns rest through the older rhythm of movement and darkness. So when we ask why ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today, sleep gives another quiet answer. Their world was dangerous, but it still gave the body powerful signals about time. Our world is safer in many ways, but it can blur the signals that tell an ancient body when to wake, when to eat, when to repair, and when to let go. Night was once a physical event. It was not only an hour on a clock, it was a change in the whole world around the body. Light faded from the sky, air cooled, insects changed their sound, fires became more important. Human voices lowered. Movement slowed because the eyes could no longer read the land in the same way. The body did not have to be persuaded that night had arrived. Night pressed itself into the skin, the eyes, the ears, and the nervous system. Near the beginning of human life, this mattered because the body used these signals to organize itself. Darkness helped shift the brain towards sleep. Cooler temperatures helped mark the resting phase. Morning light helped restore alertness. Hunger, movement, work, and fatigue gave sleep a physical weight. The group's rhythm also mattered. People did not sleep in total isolation from the social world. They slept near others, listened through the dark, woke sometimes, turned toward heat, tended children, or responded to danger. Sleep was not always one smooth block, but it still belonged to a world where day and night had strong boundaries. Modern life has weakened those boundaries in a way the ancient body could not have expected. A person can live through an entire day without enough natural light, then enter a night brighter than many ancient evenings. The ceiling light, the phone, the television, the computer, the street lamp outside the window, all of them tell the eyes that darkness is negotiable. The brain receives light at a time when older systems are waiting for dimness. The body may delay sleep hormones, hold alertness longer, and keep attention attached to the world. This is not a small change. Sleep is one of the body's deepest regulators. It helps the immune system reset, helps memory settle, helps appetite hormones stabilize, helps blood pressure fall, and helps tissues repair. When night is repeatedly delayed or fragmented, the body may begin to carry the next day with unfinished recovery. Ancient humans could lose sleep too. A crying child, cold ground, predators, insects, pain, hunger, storms, and danger could all disturb rest. But those disturbances came from a different world. They were not usually created by a technology that extended mental stimulation deep into the hours of darkness. The ancient person might wake because the fire needed attention. The modern person might wake because the mind cannot leave tomorrow. The ancient person might listen to the dark for sound. The modern person might listen to thoughts, messages, news, and imagined futures. The body's stress systems do not always know the difference. They respond to meaning, threat, and uncertainty, even when the threat has no shape in the room. This connects sleep to the diseases we fear today. Poor sleep can make hunger stronger and fullness weaker. It can make the body less efficient at handling sugar. It can keep blood pressure from falling normally at night. It can raise stress signals and support low inflammation. It can change mood, memory, and decision-making. None of this means that bad sleep alone creates every modern disease. Human illness is always more complex than one cause, but repeated sleep disruption becomes one more modern pressure placed on an ancient body. The first humans did not build their biology around 24-hour brightness, late eating, shifting work times, and constant information. They built it under sunlight, firelight, darkness, temperature change, movement, and social listening. The body still expects those older cues. When they are missing, it tries to adapt, but adaptation has costs. A person may sleep in a safer room than any ancient human knew, and still wake more tired than a body in danger should feel. That is the strange reversal. Safety removed many threats from the night, but modern life filled the night with signals that keep the body unfinished. Ancient humans did not rarely get many modern diseases because their nights were easy. Their nights were often hard. But their nights were still nights. They had darkness strong enough to tell the body where it was in time. They had fatigue tied to movement. They had fewer artificial ways to keep the brain open after the world had closed. In the modern world, the sun can set, the body can lie down, and yet some older part of us may still be waiting for night to truly begin. There is a deep connection between sleep and the diseases that seem to belong to modern life. Sleep is not only the time when a person disappears from the world, it is the time when the body changes its work. Blood pressure should soften. The brain should sort memory and emotion. The immune system should adjust its signals. Hormones should follow their ancient timing. Appetite, repair, temperature, and stress should move into a quieter pattern. When this rhythm is disturbed again and again, the body does not simply lose rest, it loses timing. And timing is one of the hidden foundations of health. Near the beginning of the human story, timing came from outside the body as much as from inside it. Dawn, heat, hunger, walking, gathering, firelight, darkness, cold air, group quiet, and the slow lowering of activity told the body where it was in the day. These signals were not perfect. Ancient nights could be broken by fear, pain, weather, children, insects, or smoke. But the world still gave strong cues. The sun rose without negotiation. Darkness arrived without needing to be chosen. The body learned to read those cycles before any human knew how to measure an hour. Modern life has not removed the body's need for timing. It has only made timing easier to confuse. A person may wake before sunrise because an alarm demands it, sit indoors through the brightest hours, eat at irregular times, drink caffeine late, look into bright screens after sunset, and try to sleep while the mind is still full of work, news, or worry. The body may be tired, yet still receive signals of wakefulness. The room may be safe, yet the nervous system may remain alert. The stomach may be full when older rhythms expect quiet. The brain may be stimulated when darkness should be doing its slow work. In this way, the modern body can become disconnected from the very signals that once helped it repair. This disconnection matters because many feared diseases are not only about what enters the body, but when it enters, when the body moves, when it rests, and when stress is allowed to fall. Eating late is not the same as eating after a day of movement and before a dark night. Sitting all day and sleeping poorly is not the same as resting after walking, carrying, searching, and making heat. Light at midnight is not the same signal as firelight fading at the edge of sleep. The ancient body was shaped by cycles that linked food, movement, light, and rest together. Modern life can pull them apart. Food can arrive without effort. Light can arrive without sun. Wakefulness can continue without purpose. Rest can be attempted without recovery. Over many years, these separations may contribute to metabolic strain, higher appetite, worse glucose control, blood pressure changes, low inflammation, and emotional exhaustion. None of this means ancient humans slept like children in peace. They did not. The ground could be hard, the cold could wake them, a sound in the dark could matter. Smoke could sting the eyes and lungs. A hungry child could break the night. Yet their sleep problems often belong to the world that shaped the body. Weather, danger, hunger, warmth, group safety, and physical fatigue. Modern sleep problems often come from signals the body never evolved to sort cleanly. Artificial brightness, mental overstimulation, social clocks, long indoor days, chronic stress, and a future imagined before the eyes close. This is why sleep belongs in the story of modern disease. The body that cannot find night cannot fully find repair. The immune system may stay more alert. Appetite may lean toward quick energy. Stress may become harder to quiet. The heart may lose some of the nightly lowering it expects. Memory may become heavier because emotion was not fully processed. Ancient humans rarely developed some modern diseases in the same pattern because their world kept time more firmly around them. It was dangerous, but it was also rhythmic. Our world is safer in many ways, but it can turn day and night into something less distinct, less honest, and less readable to the body. The ancient body still waits for the old sequence: light, movement, hunger, effort, food, fading light, cooling air, quiet, and rest. When that sequence breaks for years, sickness may not arrive loudly. It may arrive as tiredness, weight, pressure, inflammation, craving, and a body that no longer knows exactly when the day has ended. The human stress response is ancient. Long before cities, money, deadlines, traffic, messages, and news, the body already knew how to react to danger. A sudden sound in the dark, the scent of a predator, a stranger approaching the camp, a child missing from sight, a dangerous climb, a storm moving across the horizon, hunger after several difficult days. These were the kinds of pressures that shaped the nervous system near the beginning of human life. The body learned to become alert quickly. The heart could beat faster, breathing could deepen, blood could move toward muscles, attention could narrow, pain could be ignored for a short time, energy could be released into the bloodstream. All of this happened for a simple reason. Survival often depended on action. Stress was not meant to be pleasant. It was meant to prepare the body to do something. Run, fight, climb, carry, search, protect, escape, endure. The stress response was a tool for movement in a world where movement solved many problems. This is one reason ancient humans rarely experienced stress in the same form that many people know today. They certainly felt fear. They felt grief, uncertainty, conflict, loss, hunger, and danger. A winter could threaten survival. A failed hunt could matter deeply. Illness could take a family member. A storm could destroy shelter. The emotional lives of ancient humans were real and complex, but many of their threats were immediate and visible. The body could identify them. The nervous system could mobilize around them. The danger often had a shape in the environment. When the event ended, the stress response had a chance to fall. The body could return to a different state. Modern life changed this pattern in a subtle but important way. Many of the threats that activate stress are no longer physical in the ancient sense. They may be social, financial, psychological, informational, or imagined. A person may worry about work while sitting still. Fear may come from an email, a debt, a deadline, a relationship problem, a health concern, or a future event that has not happened. The body can respond as if action is required, but action may not be possible. The heart accelerates, muscles tense, hormones rise, attention narrows, yet the person remains in a chair, in a car, in a room, or in bed. The ancient machinery is activated, but the ancient outlet is missing. Near the beginning of the human story, stress and movement were often linked. A difficult situation usually demanded physical effort. A dangerous animal required escape. A hunt required pursuit. Cold required gathering fuel. Hunger required searching. A threat to the group required action. Even grief and social conflict existed within lives filled with movement, sunlight, changing weather, and daily physical demands. The body's alarm system was embedded inside an active landscape. Today, many people experience repeated stress without the same physical resolution. The alarm can ring for hours, days, months, or even years. A problem can follow a person into the home, into the evening, into sleep, and into the next morning. The body remains prepared for action, even when action never arrives. This difference matters because stress is connected to many of the diseases we fear today. Chronic stress can influence sleep, appetite, blood pressure, inflammation, immune function, and metabolic health. It can shape how the body handles food, stores energy, and recovers from ordinary challenges. The stress response itself is not harmful. Without it, our ancestors would not have survived. The problem emerges when a system built for temporary activation becomes a near-permanent background condition. The first humans did not evolve for a world where information arrives continuously, where social comparison can happen at any hour, where work follows people home, and where worries can exist entirely inside thought. The body still responds using ancient chemistry. It still releases signals that once prepared a hunter, a gatherer, a parent, or a traveler to meet a visible challenge. But many modern challenges have no clear finish line. They continue long after the body has prepared itself. This is one of the quiet reasons ancient humans rarely carried some modern diseases in the same pattern. Their lives were harder in many physical ways, but their stress often belonged to immediate circumstances. Our lives are safer in many ways, yet stress can become detached from place, detached from action, and detached from ending. The ancient body was built to survive danger. It was not built to remain endlessly prepared for danger that never fully arrives. A modern person can be under stress while nothing in the room is moving. This is one of the strangest differences between the old human body and the world it now inhabits. The hands may be still, the legs may be still, the body may be seated, indoors, protected from weather, predators, hunger, and physical attack. Yet inside, the heart may beat as if something must be faced. The shoulders tighten, the jaw holds pressure, breathing becomes shallow, sleep becomes lighter, appetite changes, the mind circles the same thought again and again. The body is preparing for action, but no action comes. This is not because the body is foolish, it is because the body is ancient. Near the beginning of human life, stress was usually tied to circumstances that demanded some form of response. A person might need to climb, run, carry, search, hide, fight, call out, protect a child, build a shelter, find water, or move with the group. The stress response helped organize energy for those tasks. It sharpened attention. It made the body ready. Then, after danger passed, after the work was done, after the group settled, after darkness arrived, the body had a chance to come down. Modern stress often lacks this ending. A worry can be carried without being solved. A message can remain in the mind after the screen is closed. A financial problem can sit inside the body for months. A social fear can repeat without any physical movement to complete the alarm. A person may feel threatened by possibilities, not by something visible in the grass. The nervous system does not always separate imagined danger from immediate danger as cleanly as we might hope. It listens to meaning. It listens to uncertainty. It listens to loss of control. In that way, the modern world can make an ancient system work over time. This has deep consequences for disease. Stress can affect how a person sleeps, how the body handles sugar, how blood pressure behaves, how appetite shifts, how inflammation is regulated, and how the immune system balances defense and repair. It can also shape behavior quietly. A tired and stressed person may crave faster energy. They may move less. They may sleep later. They may feel less able to cook, walk, rest, or connect with others. Then the body receives several modern pressures at once: mental strain, low movement, poor sleep, irregular meals, and low recovery. Ancient humans faced fear and hardship, but the pressures were often woven into a life of movement, daylight, shared labor, and direct environmental response. A hard day used the muscles. A cold night demanded heat. Hunger demanded search. Fear demanded attention toward a real place. The body's alarm system was not always trapped inside thought. It passed through the limbs, the lungs, the hands, and the ground. This does not mean ancient emotional life was simple. Early humans likely carried grief, memory, conflict, attachment, jealousy, uncertainty, and loss. They were fully human, but their stress was shaped by a smaller social world and a more immediate landscape. The threats were often closer but also more physically defined. Modern threats can be distant, invisible, symbolic, and continuous. A person can fear a future that has not arrived. They can compare themselves to strangers they will never meet. They can receive bad news from the other side of the world before trying to sleep. They can be socially surrounded and still feel alone. The body reads loneliness, insecurity, and uncertainty as real burdens because, for a social species, separation and exclusion have always mattered. In small ancient groups, belonging was not an emotion only. It was survival. To be outside the group was dangerous. that old sensitivity remains. Modern life can activate it in new ways, through isolation, competition, unstable work, crowded cities without close bonds, and constant signals of comparison. So the stress response becomes another place where modern disease finds a quiet opening. The ancient body was built to rise for danger, act, recover, and return to the group. The modern body may rise for danger, stay seated, keep thinking, sleep poorly, and rise again the next day without true recovery. Over years, this unfinished alarm can become part of the background of health. Ancient humans rarely developed some modern diseases in the same pattern, not because they were free from fear, but because their fear often had a clearer path through action, environment, and social repair. Our fear can remain suspended, without shape, without movement, and without rest. The deepest problem with modern stress is that it can become a climate instead of an event. In the ancient world, danger often arrived with edges. A sound in the dark had a direction, a storm had a sky. Hunger had a hollow feeling and a path toward search. Cold had a season, a wind, a need for shelter and fire. Conflict had faces, injury had pain and blood. These dangers could be severe, and many of them could kill, but they belonged to circumstances that the body could organize around. The nervous system could rise, the muscles could prepare, attention could narrow, and then the body could act. It might not succeed. The person might still suffer. Yet the response had a shape. Modern stress often has no clean shape. It can come from waiting, comparing, remembering, anticipating, calculating, fearing, and imagining. It can come from systems too large to see and problems too slow to solve. The body receives the signal of threat, but the threat is spread across time. There may be no single moment when the danger ends, no clear movement that completes the response, no group fire where the body can feel the day closing. This is why chronic stress belongs so closely to the diseases many people fear today. It does not strike like a predator. It soaks into sleep, appetite, blood pressure, inflammation, and the way energy is stored. Near the beginning of human life, stress was often tied to survival work. A hungry group moved, a cold group gathered fuel, a frightened group listened, watched, and adjusted. A wounded person rested while others helped if help was possible. The body was surrounded by a world where danger often demanded bodily response. The first humans were not free from anxiety, grief, or uncertainty, but their nervous systems were trained by environments where many threats were immediate enough to be met through action, attention, and social support. The modern nervous system still carries that inheritance. It still treats uncertainty as important. It still treats social rejection as danger, because for most of human history, belonging to a group was not optional. It still prepares the body for movement when fear rises, but now fear can be abstract. A person can feel threatened by a number on a screen, a message that has not been answered, a future illness, a changing job, a social comparison, or a memory that returns at night. The body may release energy into the blood, tighten muscles, alter digestion, and delay sleep, yet the person may remain still. The ancient response has no ancient completion. Over years, this can help create the conditions in which modern disease grows. Stress can make sleep shorter or lighter. Poor sleep can increase hunger and reduce patience. Fatigue can reduce movement. Low movement can worsen metabolic strain. Metabolic strain can support inflammation. Inflammation can affect mood and energy. The body enters a loop, not because it is weak, but because several old systems are being activated in a world that does not give them their old endings. Ancient humans had loops too, especially when hunger, infection, conflict, or injury lasted. Their lives were not balanced in a perfect way, but many modern loops are built from comfort mixed with pressure, safe rooms with restless minds, abundant food with tired bodies, social connection without deep belonging, information without rest, survival systems without visible survival tasks. This is a new kind of burden for an old body. It helps explain why ancient humans rarely developed some feared modern diseases in the same pattern. Their danger was often harsher, but it was less likely to remain as an invisible mental pressure across years of sitting, bright nights, constant information, and delayed recovery. The lesson is not that ancient life was calmer. It was not. The lesson is that the body's stress response was shaped for alarms that rise, demand something, and fall. When the alarm becomes a background sound, the body begins to live as if danger is always near, even when the room is quiet, the door is locked, and no enemy is there. The safest way to misunderstand ancient health is to imagine that ancient humans were simply stronger, cleaner, or more naturally balanced than we are. That story is tempting because it gives the past a kind of purity. It makes the modern world feel like the only source of sickness. But the evidence of old bodies tells a quieter and more difficult truth. Ancient humans did not live without disease. They lived with a different pattern of disease. Their bones, teeth, tools, burials, and living environments show hardship clearly. A healed fracture in an old skeleton tells us that someone fell, was struck, or survived an accident serious enough to mark the bone. Worn joints suggest years of carrying, walking, kneeling, climbing, grinding, or working with the body. Teeth worn flat, broken, infected, or lost before death show that the mouth was often under stress. Lines in teeth and bones can show difficult periods during childhood, when growth was interrupted by hunger, illness, or strain. Some remains show infection reaching bone. Some show injuries that healed, meaning the person survived long enough for the body to repair itself, perhaps with help from others. This is not a picture of perfect health. It is a picture of survival written into hard tissue. Near the beginning of the human story, the body was exposed to the world directly. The ground was not smooth. Food was not sterile. Water was not guaranteed clean. Smoke from fire could irritate the lungs and eyes. Parasites could enter through food, water, soil, insects, or close contact. Childbirth carried danger. Wounds could become infected. Hunger could weaken resistance. Cold and heat could press the body beyond comfort. A person might live with pain that modern medicine could identify and treat, but for them it was simply part of being alive. So when we say ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today, we must not let that become a false praise of the past. They were not untouched. They were vulnerable in ways many modern people have been protected from. The difference is that their vulnerability often left different traces. Modern people fear heart disease, diabetes, dementia, cancer, chronic inflammation, high blood pressure, and the long decline of old age. Ancient people often faced infected wounds, dental disease, parasites, broken bones, childbirth risks, childhood illness, hunger, exposure, and injuries from a hard physical world. These are not small dangers. They are simply different dangers. Archaeology helps correct the imagination because it does not allow the ancient body to remain a symbol. It shows marks. It shows wear. It shows that bodies carried the cost of walking, chewing, lifting, giving birth, healing, and enduring. But archaeology also has limits. Bone preserves certain stories better than others. A broken arm can remain visible for thousands of years. A worn tooth can survive. Arthritis can leave a trace. An infection that reaches bone may be recognized, but many internal diseases vanish with soft tissue. Diseased arteries may disappear. Many tumors leave no mark on the skeleton. A person with memory decline, fatigue, chest pain, or metabolic illness may leave little evidence after burial. This means we must be careful with silence. If a disease is hard to see in ancient remains, that does not prove it never existed. The past can hide suffering as easily as it can reveal it. This careful view matters because the central question is not whether ancient humans were better bodies. The question is why the diseases that dominate modern fear did not dominate their world in the same way. Their environment made some illnesses more likely and others less likely. Their shorter average lives limited many age-related diseases. Their small groups limited some epidemic diseases. Their physical activity and irregular food patterns limited some diseases of abundance. Their lack of modern sanitation, medicine, and safety increased other dangers. The ancient body was not a miracle. It was a body negotiating with a harsher world. The modern body is not a failure. It is the same ancient body negotiating with a world of longer life, easier calories, dense populations, artificial light, chronic stress, and reduced movement. The bones of the past do not tell us to return to hardship. They remind us that every way of living creates its own map of illness. Ancient humans rarely got some of the diseases we fear today. but they paid for that absence with risks we would fear just as deeply if they returned. The remains of ancient people speak most clearly when we let them stay human. A skeleton is not an argument for a perfect past. It is the record of a life that had weight, pain, repair, and sometimes care. A healed fracture says that the bone was broken, but it also says the person lived long enough for healing to begin. In many cases, that may have required help. Someone may have brought food, watched over the injured person, shared warmth, slowed the group, or protected them through a weak period. A worn tooth says something about diet and chewing, but it may also hint at years of discomfort. An infected jaw can show that a small problem in the mouth became a serious burden. Arthritic joints can show repeated labor, movement, age, or old injury. These traces prevent us from turning ancient humans into symbols of natural health. They were not symbols. They were bodies under pressure. Near the beginning of the human story, the body survived by accepting constant contact with rough conditions. It walked on uneven ground. It carried loads without modern tools. It used teeth not only for eating, but often for gripping, processing fibers, softening hides, or holding materials. It slept on surfaces that changed with season and place. It breathed smoke from fires that gave warmth and safety. It shared space with insects, parasites, soil, blood, plants, animals, and weather. The body was not protected from the world. It was immersed in it. This immersion shaped a different map of illness from the one many people fear today. Ancient bodies may show injuries from accidents, strain from heavy use, dental wear from tough foods, growth interruptions from childhood stress, and infections that reached bone. These are not the diseases that usually dominate modern health conversations, but they were real. They could decide whether a person could walk, chew, carry, give birth, sleep, or keep up with the group. In a world without modern pain relief, dentistry, surgery, antibiotics, or emergency care, a small physical problem could become a large part of life. A bad tooth could change eating. A healed leg fracture could leave a limp. A chronic infection could drain strength. A parasite could weaken a child. Hunger during growth could leave marks long after the season had passed. Ancient humans rarely got some diseases we fear today, but they did not live in gentle bodies. They lived in bodies that paid for survival directly. This is why the archaeological record must be read with humility. It reveals some suffering and hides other suffering. Bone is strong, but it is selective. It preserves the history of hard tissues better than soft organs. It can show trauma, dental disease, arthritis, some infections, and signs of nutritional stress. But it often cannot show high blood pressure, early heart disease, many cancers, liver disease, depression, anxiety, chronic fatigue, or memory loss. A person could have carried internal illness and left no clear mark in the earth. So the absence of evidence is not the same as the absence of disease. The past may look quiet because much of its pain was made of tissue that disappeared. This careful thinking protects the truth of the whole story. We do not need to claim that ancient humans were healthier in every way. We only need to see that their disease environment was different. They were less exposed to some modern pressures. Constant refined food, long sedentary days, artificial light at night, mass urban density, long lifespans in large numbers, and chronic abstract stress. But they were more exposed to other pressures: injury, infection, parasites, childbirth danger, hunger, exposure, smoke, dental wear, and limited treatment. The same human body, placed in different worlds, reveals different weaknesses. That is the honest center of the question. Ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today, not because they had escaped the burden of flesh, but because their world placed the burden elsewhere. Their bodies broke, healed, wore down, fought infection, carried scars, and sometimes disappeared before slow diseases had time to rise. The modern body carries another burden. It lives longer, sits more, eats differently, sleeps under altered signals, and survives old dangers long enough to meet new ones. The bones of the past do not tell us that ancient life was better. They tell us that every human environment chooses which illnesses become visible. The more carefully we look at ancient bodies, the less useful it becomes to ask whether they were healthier than us. A better question is what kind of world their bodies were answering. Their bones do not describe a life free from suffering. They describe bodies shaped by walking, hunger, carrying, childbirth, weather, infection, healing, and repeated contact with the land. A person who survived into maturity may have carried old injuries, worn teeth, painful joints, scars in soft tissue that vanished, parasites that left little trace, and memories of hunger that no skeleton can fully show. This matters because the modern imagination often makes the past too clean. We see that ancient humans rarely faced many of today's feared diseases in the same large pattern, and we are tempted to imagine they possessed a simpler, truer health. But the truth is quieter. Their bodies were not free. Their bodies were claimed by different dangers. Near the beginning of the human story, disease did not need supermarkets, offices, screens, factories, or late-night lights to harm a person. It could arrive through a thorn, a tooth, a birth, a river, a smoky shelter, a cold night, a parasite, a fall, a bite, or a season when food thinned. Many of these dangers were immediate and physical. They did not always require decades to become serious. A small infection could become a turning point. A broken leg could change whether someone could move with the group. A damaged tooth could make eating painful for years. A difficult childhood could leave marks in bones and teeth even if the person survived. These were ancient diseases in the broadest sense, not always named, not always recorded, but deeply present in the body. At the same time, archaeology forces humility because it preserves only part of the story. Hard tissue survives, soft experience disappears. We can see some fractures, some infections, some tooth wear, some arthritis, some signs of nutritional stress. But we often cannot see breathlessness, chest pain, dizziness, depression, anxiety, early tumours, blood pressure, liver disease, immune problems, or confusion in old age. An ancient person may have lived with illness that left no obvious mark after death. So the absence of a modern diagnosis in the ground is not the same as proof that the disease never existed. It only means the past speaks through damaged evidence. The careful lesson is not that ancient humans were untouched by the diseases we fear. It is that those diseases rarely had the same opportunity, scale, and visibility. Some needed more old people. Some needed dense settlements. Some needed repeated abundance. Some needed low movement across many years. Some needed artificial light, long stress, or a modern food environment. Others may have existed quietly but left little trace. This balanced view protects the honesty of the whole video. It prevents the false comfort of saying that the ancient world was healthy and the modern world is sick. Both worlds made people suffer, but they organized suffering differently. The ancient world often harmed the body from outside. Cold, infection, injury, hunger, childbirth, parasites, and untreated wounds. The modern world often harms the body more slowly from inside patterns of living. Surplus, stillness, stress, poor sleep, age, crowding, and long exposure to low-level strain. Neither story is complete without the other. Modern life has saved people from countless old dangers. It has also created conditions where slow diseases can grow. Ancient life prevented some modern patterns from forming. It also exposed people to pains we would desperately avoid. The bones of the past do not invite us to return to hardship. They invite us to stop imagining the human body as separate from its environment. A body is always answering a world. Change the world, and disease changes its path. Ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today, because their world did not feed those diseases in the same way. But their world fed other dangers, and the marks of those dangers still sleep in the ground. The lesson is not that we should return to the ancient world. That world was not waiting for us with clean health, perfect sleep, and natural peace. It was cold, uncertain, painful, and often dangerous. A small wound could matter. A bad tooth could change a life. A difficult birth could end one. A child could be lost to fever, hunger, or contaminated water. A winter could press on everyone. The past does not offer a simple cure for the present, but it does offer a mirror. When we look carefully at ancient humans, we begin to see that the body is not a separate object living inside history. The body is part of history. It is shaped by the world around it, and it answers that world every day. Near the beginning of human life, the body answered a world of movement, hunger, weather, darkness, small groups, rough food, direct danger, and physical repair. Today, the same body answers a world of long life, constant food, artificial light, dense populations, chronic stress, low movement, and medical survival. The body did not become meaningless because the world changed. It became more revealing. It shows us where the old design meets the new environment. This is why the question of ancient disease should not make us feel shame about being modern. It should make us more patient with the body. Many modern diseases are not signs that human beings suddenly failed. They are signs that ancient systems are working under new conditions. Appetite still values energy because energy was once uncertain. Fat storage still prepares for shortage because shortage once returned. Stress still prepares for action because danger once required movement. Inflammation still raises alarm because wounds and infections once demanded quick defense. Sleep still waits for darkness because the body learned time from the sky long before it learned time from clocks. These systems are not broken at their root. They are old. They are powerful. They are sometimes misplaced. The modern world has removed many forms of suffering, and that should not be forgotten. Clean water, vaccines, antibiotics, surgery, safer childbirth, emergency medicine, food storage, and shelter have protected human life in ways ancient people could not depend on. More children live, more mothers survive, more wounds heal, more people reach old age. These are not small victories. They are among the greatest changes in human history. But every victory changes the landscape of risk. When infections become less deadly, more people live long enough for age-related disease. When food becomes abundant, the body must manage surplus. When work becomes less physical, muscles no longer use energy in the old rhythm. When night becomes bright, sleep loses some of its ancient signals. When danger becomes psychological and continuous, stress no longer rises and falls cleanly. Human success did not end disease. It changed the kind of disease that could rise. This is the quiet value of looking back. Not to romanticize the campfire, not to reject medicine, not to pretend that ancient people knew some perfect secret. The value is to remember the original conversation between body and world. A body needs movement not because exercise is fashionable, but because movement was once woven into survival. A body needs sleep not because sleep is a luxury, but because repair depends on rhythm. A body struggles with constant excess not because it is weak, but because it was shaped for uncertainty. A body feels stressed deeply because belonging, safety, and future danger have always mattered to a social species. Understanding this does not solve every illness. It does not replace medical care. It does not make disease simple, but it can make the body less mysterious, and perhaps less blameworthy. Ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today, because those diseases needed conditions their world rarely supplied. Our world supplies them more easily. The honest lesson is not to go backward, but to ask how an ancient body might live more gently inside a modern world. A gentle way to understand modern disease is to stop seeing the body as an enemy. The body is not trying to betray us when it stores fat, raises blood pressure, craves sweetness, loses sleep, or holds tension. It is often trying to solve old problems with old tools. Those tools were shaped in a world where food was uncertain, movement was unavoidable, darkness arrived every evening, social belonging mattered for survival, and danger often had to be met with action. The same tools can become confusing in a world where food is always close. Movement can be postponed, night can be filled with light, stress can remain unresolved, and life can extend long enough for slow damage to appear. This does not mean every illness can be explained by lifestyle, or that every person is responsible for their disease. That would be too simple, and it would be unfair. Genetics, poverty, infections, pollution, medical access, age, work, trauma, chance, and social conditions all shape health. But the ancient body helps us see why the modern world can be difficult to live in, even when it seems safe. Near the beginning of human life, the body did not choose health from a list of options. It received rhythm from the land. The day asked for movement. The season changed food. Darkness limited activity. Cold and heat demanded adjustment. Hunger and effort were tied together. Community was small enough that care and conflict were physically close. The body's systems grew inside that conversation. Today, many people must create deliberately what the environment once demanded automatically. They must choose movement in a world that allows stillness. They must protect sleep in a world that sells wakefulness. They must manage appetite in a world that surrounds them with dense food. They must calm stress in a world that keeps danger symbolic and continuous. They must seek belonging in societies where people can be crowded and lonely at the same time. This is not a moral failure. It is a historical mismatch. A modern person is living with an ancient nervous system, an ancient metabolism, an ancient immune system, and an ancient need for time, touch, darkness, effort, and rest. Understanding this can make health feel less like punishment and more like translation. The body is speaking an older language. It says, move, because energy was meant to pass through muscle. Sleep, because repair needs darkness and timing. Eat with care, because appetite was built for scarcity. Seek calm, because the stress response was made to end. Seek people, because isolation was once dangerous. These are not extreme rules. They are reminders of origin. We do not need to become ancient humans again. We cannot, and we should not. We need medicine. We need sanitation. We need shelter, safety, surgery, vaccines, clean water, and the protection that modern knowledge can offer. But we also need to remember that protection alone does not give the body every signal it expects. A clean room can still hold a restless nervous system. A full refrigerator can still confuse a metabolism built for uncertainty. A safe bed can still fail to create sleep if light, stress, and timing keep the brain alert. A long life can still carry the slow burdens that time makes possible. The point is not to fear the modern world. The point is to live in it with more awareness. Ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today because their world did not feed those diseases in the same steady way. Our world often does. Yet our world also gives us the knowledge to notice the pattern. It gives us the chance to soften the mismatch, not by rejecting the present, but by bringing small pieces of the older rhythm back into a safer life. More movement, more darkness at night, more real rest, more simple food, more patience with the body, more care for one another. Perhaps health is not a return to the past. Perhaps it is the quiet work of helping an ancient body feel less lost in the world that saved it. The final lesson is quiet, because the body itself is quiet when we listen to it without blame. It does not speak in theories. It speaks in hunger, sleepiness, pain, warmth, tension, breath, fatigue, craving, fear, comfort, and recovery. These signals are old. They began long before medicine had names for them, long before cities had walls, long before fields covered valleys, long before clocks divided the day into numbers. They began in bodies that had to survive weather, hunger, movement, darkness, injury, birth, loss, and belonging. Ancient humans rarely got many of the diseases we fear today, because the world around them did not create the same long conditions for those diseases to grow. Their lives were not easier, their bodies were not purer, their suffering was not less real, but the pressures around them were different. Their diseases often came from immediate contact with the world. Wounds, infections, parasites, childbirth, hunger, smoke, cold, heat, broken bones, bad teeth, contaminated water, and the hard limits of life without modern care. Our diseases often rise from another arrangement: longer life, dense populations, constant food, low movement, artificial light, chronic stress, delayed sleep, and the slow accumulation of strain inside a body that survives many old dangers. This is not a reason to reject the modern world. It is a reason to understand it more honestly. The same civilization that brought new diseases also brought clean water, safer birth, surgery, vaccines, antibiotics, emergency care, stored food, shelter, and knowledge. Millions of people live because of these things. Many of us reach ages that ancient families would have recognized as precious, unusual, and deeply valuable. Yet when life becomes longer and safer, the body does not become free from history. It carries history into every modern room. It carries the memory of walking into a chair-bound day. It carries the memory of darkness into a night of light. It carries the memory of hunger into a world of constant food. It carries the memory of danger into worries that may never become visible. It carries the memory of the group into loneliness among crowds. If there is a useful message here, it is not a command to live like ancient people. It is a reminder to live less against the ancient body. A body may feel better when energy is allowed to move through muscle. It may rest more deeply when night is allowed to become dark. It may handle food more gently when meals are not only constant reward, but part of rhythm, attention, and care. It may calm more easily when stress is given some path through breath, movement, conversation, or rest. It may age with more dignity when we remember that many diseases are not personal failures, but the result of biology meeting environment across years. The ancient body does not ask us to abandon medicine. It asks us not to forget origin. It asks us to notice that health is never only inside the skin. It lives between the body and the world, between sleep and light, food and effort, fear and safety, loneliness and care, age and repair, comfort and movement. Ancient humans rarely got many diseases we fear today, because their world gave different instructions to the same human flesh. Our world gives new instructions every day. Some protect us. Some confuse us. Some save us from old deaths while opening the door to slower ones. To understand this is to become gentler with the body and more careful with the world we build around it. Perhaps the question is not whether ancient humans were healthier than us, or whether modern humans have lost something forever. Perhaps the quieter question is this: if the body still remembers the world it came from, what kind of modern life can help it feel at home again?